Stephen Bonnell, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No, I'm excited to, man. Obviously, everything going on, you are at the center of a lot of attention right now. There's been a characterization of your response to the attempted assassination of Trump as being unhinged or a manic episode. What is your best explanation for why the way you've responded actually makes sense?
I think that the discourse in the United States has gotten so unbelievably out of whack in that the amount of moral condemnation that we have for certain types of messages is not at all mapping onto the amount of damage a particular idea or thing is doing. I don't know how it has happened. This is like a recent idea that's kind of come to me, and I've spent a lot of time recently thinking about it, but somehow conservatives have managed to escape almost all accountability for their actions. But for some reason, liberals have to, fall to their knees and grovel and beg for forgiveness every single time something happens that might possibly be related to them. You'll see liberals, begging and pleading for forgiveness for the BLM riots, or, we've had over the recent few weeks, every single liberal news station is talking about Biden and his senility and his need to step down. And conservatives, when you ask them about anything like January 6th, that was a false flag. For the governor kidnapping plot, Gretchen Whitmer, that was just the FBI. They wouldn't have done it otherwise. For all the vaccine and the COVID misinformation, it's not misinformation. That's all still true. And we just don't trust vaccines anymore. The worlds of these two people are totally divergent. And I think that, unfortunately, I've been involved in this game of treating both similarly, even though I say that they're not of the same magnitude, that the problems are the same magnitude. And I think I've given, by the way that I affiliate with or the way that I engage with right-wingers, I think that I've given too much credence to that side in terms of making their arguments seem more legitimate than they are. So I am recentering a lot of my rhetoric and a lot of my engagement back to where I think it should have been for a longer period of time, in that these ideas are absolutely unhinged. You guys are in a totally different world, and there needs to start being more cultural accountability for the types of crazy, insane things that you're saying.
Okay, so would it be a fair characterization to say that the amplitude of your response is necessary to get people to accurately identify the difference in scope between the ideas that the conservatives are putting forth and getting away with, and the ideas that the liberals are putting forth and being hounded for?
Yeah, a little bit. I think in a more fair world where where the amplitude, I guess, of the responses to different behaviors on both sides was more mapped onto what I thought it would be, my response might be a little bit lower. To be clear, also, and I've said this multiple times, I don't think it's a good thing when people die. I don't want anybody to die. I don't think anybody should be killing anybody for political reasons. But to beg for sympathy or to pretend that you deserve sympathy because of violence that might have happened at a given event, when your side has been driving up the temperature of this country and engaging in the most and celebrating the most divisive politics in recent U.S. history, is inane to me.
So the way I try to think through my own life and the way that I encourage other people to think through theirs is, what is my goal and what are the actions that I can take that are going to get me to my goal? So when I think of what you've been doing over the last, call it 2 years, you've really made yourself the go-to liberal that people on either side of the spectrum are going to want to engage with. And you really have made, you've been incredibly respectful. You've been very thoughtful. You are extremely good in debating. And so suddenly it felt like we had two sides that could really come together. And the response to the debate that you did with Ben Shapiro on Lex, I think, is proof of that. Huge number of views, and we got to see really different vantage points politically coming together to have a fruitful conversation. Then after Corey was killed and your reaction came out, that was very inflammatory, I would say. It seemed intentionally inflammatory. I was like, are you now rebranding what you're trying to put forward? I'm done pretending to be civil and nice, and this is where I really wanted to be the whole time? Or are you going to renormalize? Walk me through the dramatic change in presentation?
So the way that my YouTube editor gave me kind of this idea in that I kind of like, I can have long legs and short arms, or I can have long arms and short legs. That at my most aggressive, I have very short legs but very long arms, meaning that if I get you in my grasp, I'm going to be incredibly compelling because I'm going to be making very strong arguments in the most aggressive manner possible with the most overwhelming like style of argumentation. But my legs are very short at that point. I can't get out of my community very much because people just see me as being incredibly aggressive, and they're like, okay, I want to talk to this guy. Like this guy's like way too, he's way too mean and debatey or whatever. I think before I had very long legs but very short arms, and that I hate that comment that you just made. It actually has been eating away at my brain for months, and I've complained about this on stream. This has been building for probably for the entire year. If you go and you look at the debates that I've done with Candace Owens, with Jordan Peterson, with Ben Shapiro, the comments under all these videos are the exact same. Wow, what a nice debate. It's so nice that these people have spoken to each other. Wow, cool that we can come together and talk. Wow, what a nice debate. I hate that because nobody's actually considering any of the things being said. They're just happy that two people can sit in a room and talk to each other. However, for me to do this requires me to blunt my perception of the world so much, and to blunt my desired engagement with some of the things that people are saying. It is physically excruciating for me. It is psychologically like destroying me. That like an example that I give for Ben Shapiro is like I had this whole like train of like I'll plot out rhetorically and factually like how I want to think about a debate before I go into it, and all these notes are public. I talk about this on stream. And for Ben Shapiro, I had this whole line of, I want to prove to you that you guys treat Donald Trump differently than you guys treat Joe Biden. Like you grade him on a curve. And I asked him that question in the Lex Fridman debate. I was like, do you think that you guys grade Donald Trump on a curve? And he was like, yeah, of course. And I was like, oh. And it just like short circuited my brain. I could have had a 2-hour conversation on just that topic alone. And I don't like that I've had these conversations with people, and all I feel like I'm doing is I'm shortening the Overton window, where you have all of these insane people, the Hassans, the Voshes, the people far on the left that, in my opinion, are just insane. And then you've got these insane far-right people that I would say right now is the majority of the conservative movement that all follow Donald Trump. And what happens is when I show up to debate, I'm not as crazy as these guys, so I'm here. What happens is when I show up to debate, I've shortened the Overton window, and now the viewers are like, oh, okay, well, this guy seems cool and reasonable. He's representing something. So like maybe I'll move from like here to like here. But now I have much stronger conviction because I see that like this guy's represented the left, and I've heard their arguments, and now I'm like over here. And it's like, no, to be clear, like my position might be here, but in my mind, the reasonable discourse is like from here to like here. Like these guys that I'm talking to over here that I'm being nice to and I'm being cordial to are absolutely insane. Like we are on a crash course for this country to like into oblivion. And I have to talk to these guys like they're normal, intelligent, thinking human beings. Like I just sit across from Jordan Peterson saying, oh, 20% excess deaths in Europe are all caused by the vaccine. And I'm like, huh, okay, yeah, wow, that's a take. Yeah. Or yeah, I could, there's a million examples, but it's not good. It's not okay. It's not cool.
Okay, so I want to understand that very last part. It's not okay. It's not good. It's not cool. It implies that there is a destination that you're trying to get to. What is that destination?
I think before 6 days ago, I think my destination was always like trying to present a more understandable argument on my side and kind of like move people a little bit closer, meet them where they were and move them a little bit closer. But I think, especially as I've begun to read more, I feel like the time is running shorter on that. So now my focus has very violently and very abruptly shifted to, okay, well, if you're a liberal, here are the reasons why you should care about these particular things. And here are the like 3 arguments that you need to be beating every single conservative over the head with from now until the election. And you don't talk about anything else until you've run through these 3 things. Nothing else is allowed to be spoken about until you've gotten this. It's insane that they're allowed to skirt by on these things and nobody makes them like account for them. That's where I'm at right now, basically. Yeah.
Okay. So the 3 things that you want to go over and over, I don't remember all 3, but I know that January 6th is one that
it was an insurrection. Yeah. It's like their reasonable minds cannot disagree on this point.
Okay. So the goal behind getting every conservative to confront those things, namely the insurrection, just cannot be looked past, is to get them to vote for Biden, to get them to break out of cult-like thinking? What is the end game to that confrontation?
There's 4 levers, I think, when it comes to mobilizing voters in a 2-person race. You can either
and is that the goal? Mobilize voters in a 2-person race?
Kind of. Well, there's 4 things. There's 4 ways to do it. You can either increase or decrease the turnout on your side, or you can increase or decrease the turnout on the other side. So I guess my goal is to decrease the turnout on the other side by demotivating, like, hey, the guy that you're voting for is an insurrectionist, okay? Like, here are the reasons why you should not like this candidate. Even if you're conservative, you shouldn't like this candidate. And then on my side, it's to increase, it's to motivate. So, hey, this is a really important election. Regardless of what you think about Biden, reasonable minds cannot disagree on what this election should look like. There's no place for a reasonable disagreement here. The only people that are disagreeing are people that are bought and paid for, people that do propaganda, or people that just don't have the information. So that that third group, I'm also kind of hitting at, although it's hard because I have to be very aggressive, and that's a very not good way to appeal to somebody who just doesn't have the information, because now you make them feel like a piece of shit just because they don't know something. But the problem is that working against me, you can also interrupt me at any time too, so I guess
no, go for it.
Something that has always been working against me is you have the left, you've got the right, and then you've got this group of people in the middle that call themselves centrists, and they're all conservative. All of them are conservative. Every single one carries water for Donald Trump. You will never find a person who goes, oh, I'm like a centrist. I think I'd probably support Biden. Those people don't exist. All of them are the Tim Pools, the Constantines, the Stephen Crowder doesn't call himself centrist. Any of these like people that call themselves, oh, we're like centrist, we're not politically partisan. All of them support Donald Trump. Elon Musk, right? All of them support Donald Trump. And so when I go out and argue, I'm instantaneously thrust to the far left just because all of these people in the center give the illusion of me being further left than I actually am, which is very, very, very frustrating. And those are the people that I have to come out very aggressively against.
Okay, so there are a lot of different pieces here. So one, there's one thing that you left out that is a potential thing for people looking at Trump. They're not necessarily just uninformed or whatever. You gave 3 reasons.
Yeah.
But the one missing is that they're looking at the same thing you're looking at and they see something different. So
Impossible.
This is, I will invite you into my interpretation of humanity, and then you can tell me if I'm crazy. And by the way, I consider myself a centrist.
Sure.
So in this show one, if the election were today, I'd be voting for RFK, which I think you also have beef with him. So we can certainly go down that road. And I can certainly explain why and what I'm looking for. But my point being that the one thing I think when people assess human animals is they fail to understand what I call frame of reference. So frame of reference, you can think of as goggles that people wear. They are wildly distorted. And so you are looking at the world through a different set of distortions than I'm looking at the world. And so we both say, hey, let's look at this camera. We're looking at it and we may see 2 very different things because of the distortions through which we view that. I think there are 3 things that make up those distortions. They are biology, so we're all a little bit different. Then you've got beliefs and you've got values. So beliefs are, this is how I think the world is. Values are, this is how I believe the world ought to be. And between those 3 things, hey, it doesn't matter what you look at, it only matters what you see. So I will say, I think you will have a hard time predicting the outcome of your actions if you don't account for that possibility, because then you can at least map it, right? So
I understand what you're saying, and I agree with every single thing you've said, 100%. I truly with all my heart believe that, and I've never, not a single time, and if any conservative wants to have a debate with me on this, I will gladly do it. I have never met a person that will disagree when confronted with all the facts about the insurrection stuff. The only way that they survive that argument is in the end to admit that it was an insurrection, but it was one for a good cause. That's the only escape. It is undeniable otherwise. Every single conservative I've ran through these arguments with, unless they're denying some fundamental fact, they have to arrive at the end where they're like, okay, fine, maybe he did do these things, but it's because the election was stolen. It's because of that and that. It's like, okay, that's cool, but you're just justifying the insurrection now, which, and I'm an American. I can't say that there's no justification for an insurrection ever, right? That's what 1776 was. But I understand what you're saying, and I understand now, especially people that listen to me in the past. It seems like I've flipped a switch from like, wait, this guy used to be really reasonable. Now he's saying it's my way or the highway. It feels like he's become a demagogue just like everybody else. But I think that I've paid too much lip service And I hate myself for it because I've made it seem like these arguments on the right had so much more validity to them than they ever did. And they didn't. If two people are in a room and one tells me that humans can fly and the other tells me that humans can just jump, there is no middle ground between these two people. And it doesn't make somebody closed-minded to say that the person who says they can fly is just completely and totally factually incorrect. But
so without derailing
Sure.
into that, just I guess I'll plant a slight flag to my point about these narratives is the person hearing that humans can't fly are going to be like, bro, I flew to get here. Like I was literally in an airplane yesterday. And now we're going to get into definition of terms, which is what you meant was without the aid of like, right. But this is exactly where I think another exit ramp for people that don't believe January 6th was an insurrection is that it simply doesn't meet the legal definition of an insurrection. So one of the things that may or may not come out today as we talk is I think a lot of these things are really meant to find out what does a person value. And right now, people often don't drill down into that. And if we ran it rather than asking somebody to believe in or not believe in January 6th, which they're going to have arguments, preconceived notions that they may be blind to themselves, you just say, imagine a president who did an insurrection and they were rerunning against a candidate. What would need to be true where you would still vote for that candidate? And then you can just begin to figure out what their value system is and where it breaks down. Then we can now have the argument at the level of how we believe the world ought to be. So for instance, I have a value that says you just prima facie, you cannot elect a president that has declining cognitive abilities. So, okay, you don't even need to debate whether Joe Biden does or doesn't. We just talk about whether that's a logical way to approach this or not. Anyway, we'll get to that. So you've got this layer of what I call narrative. So people are wearing these distortion lenses and they're seeing the world in a way that is wildly different than you. And what I worry about and what made me reach out to you and say, hey, I really want to book a sit down is I saw people trying to dismiss you because of the way that you were acting. So there's the performative layer of you were clearly pissed is how it looked. You may use a slightly different
I was
word.
upset. I do stand by everything I said though.
Yeah, which you'll notice I'm not asking you to take it back, nor do I even care.
Sure.
My thing is that I look out at the world and I'm looking for people to be a part of my sense-making apparatus. I don't agree with everything that Sam Harris says, but I think he's wicked smart. And I want to be able to use him as a part of my sense-making apparatus. And I get very worried that the world just wants to discard him.
Sure. It's one of the few people I would agree with you on, I think. Yeah.
Amazing. I think you are an incredible part of the sense-making apparatus.
I'm just kidding.
And I worry that you have given people the world's easiest way to dismiss you, and people are leveraging that, and it will work very well for a huge swath of humanity. Now, my gut instinct is that you're so smart that either you really just got so pissed you snapped and used a not worthwhile tactic from my perspective, or it goes back to the initial thing that we said, which is that I am not going to be able to persuade the people I need to persuade unless I go back to my Bloodsport era.
I think that, so I'll say this as a precautionary thing, just to let people know that I keep this in mind, and it's important for everybody to keep this in mind. And I'm sure you do as well. You seem like you keep a lot of things in mind, that it's very easy to rationalize any behavior. And you can fall into a trap of post hoc rationalizing it, and you're actually just being emotional. So I do keep this in mind, because it's easy to act out and then to post hoc like, okay, well, actually it makes sense because of A, B, C, and to write the reasons for it. But the way that I see it is, my goal, if we go very, 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 very foundational, okay, so I believe I exist as a person. There are other people around me. I think that in order for me to live the best life that I can, I have to collaborate with other people, that 2 or 3 humans together can produce something far greater than these 2 or 3 people operating independently, right? So we're a collaborative species. We specialize into different tasks. As we come together and we work, there's like certain kinds of, we need a system to make that work because we specialize and because we don't have the ability to do everything, not even just in terms of work, but in terms of like securing our possessions, securing our family members and all of this. We have to agree on some rules, like, you know, let's say that there's 10 people that live on a block and they all have a house and they all buy new couches. If you're allowed to steal couches from each other, it might seem cool because today I can go and steal a couch, but tomorrow any one of those people could steal your couch, right? It's not good. So you all have to agree on some rules. As part of agreeing on those rules, at some point you can't enforce them, so you entrust like third parties to enforce those rules for you. So institutions like the police or executive agencies or whatever, right? All this to say that you build all of this out and you end up with some form of governance that ensures like the best balance of personal freedom with rules and regulations that allow you to live in the freest way possible, right? Where as long as you're not a toddler, you understand that like the freest way possible doesn't mean you have absolute freedom. I'm sure you know this because you seem like you do a lot of self-improvement stuff. I think that when people go from being very, I don't want to say lazy, but they have a ton of time and they don't do anything and whatever, into scheduling their time, that sometimes through discipline you find more freedom. Like, oh my God, if I start scheduling I didn't realize how many hours there were in the day if I am more strict scheduling my time, right? So sometimes like having more rules, more restrictions, more agencies, more regulations, like enables more types of freedom, right? All of that to say, okay, so you build this out. I believe that, I don't know if it was Churchill that said it. Somebody said that like democracy, what is the quote? It's like, or maybe it was either capitalism or democracy is, it's like not the greatest, but it's the best we have or whatever. There's a much better
the best
quote.
of the worst systems,
something
basically.
like that. Yeah, do a voice over me nailing that quote. Okay, I don't remember what the quote was, but okay, you'll get that in post. Okay,
I know what you mean.
Yeah, but the system that we have, the principles that this country was built on, are very, very, very awesome. Okay, you had a unique opportunity to get very intelligent people together to like theory craft like the best government.
How often are you checking your credit score, afraid of identity theft or account breaches? We all use the internet every single day for important things like personal banking and remote work, so why not protect yourself with our sponsor, Aura? Aura is an all-in-one cybersecurity service that keeps you safe online. Aura identifies data brokers exposing your info and submits opt-out requests on your behalf. Aura also monitors your credit, tracks your passwords for data breaches, and secures your online activity with VPN and anti-malware protection. You can try Aura for free for 2 weeks by clicking the link in the description or scanning the QR code.
Right? Usually things develop way more organically. You know, you've got empires and kings and these things kind of, you know, sprawl out from here. But for the US, you know, you had a bunch of people sit down like, okay, well, what's worked and what hasn't worked, you know, and then we're going to make these like corny names, you know, plebeians. We're going to write papers to each other. We're going to argue and debate. And it's going to be this lively, huge thing to form like the coolest, best government ever. And there's a reason why I believe that two things. One, the United States is the largest, most dominating country in the world right now. That's undeniable. And two, the United States has the oldest surviving constitution of any country in the world. Even though we're a relatively young country, our founding document, we have the longest surviving original constitution of any country that exists in the world. I think that these systems are really important. I think that somebody like Donald Trump, I don't believe a reasonable mind could disagree with me when I say that he represents a threat to that order, and that to support him in any way, size, shape, or form represents an existential threat to that order. So when I'm arguing with people now, if they're too far gone to that side, and it would require me to compromise on so many principles, I think I would rather energize people on my side more and give them more arguments and be involved in a more kind of like shaming or bullying of like certain types of ideas that I just don't think should be able to pass, you know, unchallenged in a highly critical sense, rather than going to conservatives and then them thinking like, oh, cool, yeah, that Destiny guy, like he's real reasonable. I'm glad that we could have a conversation about whether or not mRNA vaccines are morphing your DNA, and now I don't believe in like polio vaccines anymore. Like I actually think that, yeah, this guy's really cool that he could like hear that opinion and like be chill with it. And it's like, what are we talking about right now? That's my, yeah. That was a very, very, very roundabout answer. Did I hit your original question? I think which.
Well, we certainly have gotten to somewhere really useful, which is that revealing somebody's underlying base assumptions is exactly what you have to have, what you need to do to have a substantive debate or conversation. And so one of the things driving your animus, so the real thing I was trying to get to in the beginning is, dude, you're so effective at getting people's attention. I think you maybe don't understand how many people like me never heard about you in the Bloodsport era, but did hear about you once you were like, I'd be talking to people that helped me run the show, and they would say, oh, because I don't want to be unbalanced. So I want to bring
Sure.
people on from both sides when I'm dealing with a political issue or a cultural issue, which is where I spend most of my time. And they were like, oh, Destiny's the guy. Had never heard of you, went and looked at you and was like, oh, wow, this guy has like really got some of the aggressive debating tendencies that you do traditionally see more on the left. It's not name calling, it's going point by point. And so watching you switch your performative layer and turning off so many people, I could no longer map you. I couldn't predict your behavior. I didn't know where you were going. So, but Trump is an animating force for you. So Trump is an existential threat to the systems and the documents that were founded upon, and that's part of what's driving your animus.
Yeah.
And this goes back to the same collision that I'm having with Sam Harris, which is brilliant guy, but he is now he now sits outside of not just disagreement with me on where we necessarily want to end up, but we start disagreeing on how people ought to behave. And so I, for one, am willing to suffer the consequences of letting a mixed bag in terms of education, in terms of intellect, awareness of policies and consequences and all that group of people vote. I am perfectly willing to live in that country, knowing that anything else is just going to be worse than that. That's my base assumption. Now you have something different, which is when I see that we have somebody who has presented themselves as a threat, and this is a paraphrase of something you've said on a previous podcast, by all means, if you think I misunderstand it, let me know. But you said, I don't even want to live in a country where roughly half of the country wants to see our institutions deteriorated.
Yeah.
So that then to me, now the way that you went on the attack, where it was, I'm not even sure how to categorize it, but the lightning rod moment was where you said, I have no sympathy for Corey Comparator, who was killed at the Trump rally. That was just the thing that everybody grabbed a hold of, including myself, where I was like, I was really trying to parse what you were actually saying, which is the argument that you would die on is that that person is not worthy of sympathy. And I was like, that person is not worthy of sympathy as an argument just made me go, okay, I no longer have a reliable map of where you're at. So when I look at Trump as a threat to order, but the tool used is to say that people that show up at Trump's rallies are not worthy of sympathy. That's where I'm like, now you trigger my thing about division is the only thing that guarantees us a bad outcome. And so I have a knee-jerk reaction that will not get you where you want to go. So far, the only thing I know about where you want to go is you want to make sure that people vote for Biden. That's very acute. But so far, that's what we've mapped in this discussion.
So I don't agree that division guarantees a bad outcome. I think that that demands greater attention. I mean, by definition, there has to be some division in the country because we're a two-party country, right? So structurally, there has to be some division there. I think that division is only good, or alternate points are only good if everybody is representing things and they're making fair, justifiable arguments that ought to exist in your system. You ever play the game EVE Online?
No, but I know of it.
Okay. I learned a lot of like weird management tips in that game. One of the things I learned, we would fit our ships out to do like doctrines or whatever, and we would have a couple encounters and we were getting like wiped and it was horrible. And one thing that I realized is that when we make a new doctrine, I always have to appoint a guy to argue against it, like as best faith possible. And I think in like intelligence, and I think in large companies, you would probably know this more than I would actually, you have like red teams, basically people who do like penetration testing to make sure that you're like staying honest. If you wanted to move in a direction for your company, and let's assume that you have a guy and you're like, tell me why this isn't a good idea. What would you do, right? Or how would you do this, right? If you had another guy who was trying to tell you like, hey, I think that expanding internationally is bad, here's why, or I think that you should focus more on this demographic or whatever, right? Like this is a good type of tension. It's a good type of division. It's another person who's representing fair and reasonable arguments. And ideally that tensing of both sides is creating something stronger and better on both sides. I'm not even necessarily saying that the truth is in the middle. I'm just saying that the tension is keeping both sides grounded and tethered to reality. If you, in the management of your company, appointed another guy to argue against you, and you're like, okay, I think that it's time to, I want to expand offices in this state. And he's like, we can finally execute this plan I've had where if we were to just like abduct like 400 children and hold them hostage, okay? And you're like, stop, okay? And he's like, no, this is the time for the child hostage plan. Trust me, right? This is not valuable. It's not worthwhile. It's not good. These arguments aren't furthering anything. If anything, you're wasting time now dealing with this guy who's like, I don't want to be arguing about taking 400 children hostage to expand my market into San Francisco. I don't need to have this conversation. I don't want to be arguing whether or not George Soros and Bill Gates caused the government to have COVID lockdowns to destroy our lives. I do want to have good arguments about lockdowns, though. Was it an appropriate decision? In retrospect, it seems like it could have been less. Should it have been more top-down organized? Did we make the correct decisions with the information that we had at the time? Because you have to make decisions prospectively, not retrospectively, because time only moves in one direction, right? But because we're wasting so much time talking about whether or not the World Economic Forum is trying to get us to all eat, crickets for the rest of our lives, we can't even have the reasonable conversations anymore. And that's the damage. That's the issue that so much of our discourse is now occupied by utter putrid filth and garbage and trash that there are no more good conversations to be had. You can't have good conversations about policy. We can't take credit for any of our achievements. Everything is politicized. It's all horrible. So just centering back on, I don't think that division is necessarily bad. And I'm sure you agree in principle with what I'm saying. And I'm harping on just the word you use.
No, please.
Yeah. But I'm sure we agree largely on that like division isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just depends on what the kind of division is and then how the division is like interacting with how both sides are interacting with each other.
Yeah, so I think that's exactly correct. So this is something we talk a lot about in business. You need dynamic tension.
Yeah.
I also think that evolution gave us people that are, I'm rounding it to politics, but politically left and politically right. There's a reason if you're trying to get a large group to cooperate flexibly, you're going to need some people that are like, hey, we can't leave anybody behind. That's the left. And then you have people on the right that are like, hey, but personal responsibility because of something known as the freeloader problem. So if you evolutionarily program a species to just make sure you take care of everybody no matter what, game theory says that there will become a parasite problem where a bunch of people just do nothing and they still get the thing. So you do want that dynamic tension. There's no doubt about that. You talked about disconfirming evidence, or what I call disconfirming evidence. If you want to be successful in anything, you have to hunger for somebody to remove your blind spots, because the only thing I can tell people is that some part of your proposed solution, your thinking is flawed. You just don't know which part. And so you want somebody to help you tease that out, which most people definitely do not do. But the thing that you brought up, which I think is really important, and boy, oh boy, do I hope people hear me on this. There is a weird thing happening in culture right now that I think is brought on by social media. That is, I don't want to waste my time arguing that. And unfortunately, I hear this argument from the smartest people. And I can only imagine that the smarter somebody gets, the more frustrating it is to interact with people that process data at the level of a mortal. So I just went through this with Eric Weinstein and Terrence Howard, that whole thing. And I went to Eric and made a very aggressive appeal to please, for the love of God, go address this. I wanted him to do it on my show. He ends up going on Rogan. Fine. I'm just very glad that it ended up happening. And the reason that I am very glad that it ended up happening is we are living in the age of conspiracy. And the reason we are living in the age of conspiracy is it is excruciatingly difficult to both live a life and educate yourself on everything. So for instance, I'm reading a book right now called JFK and the Unspeakable, and it's awesome. And it makes me believe that almost certainly JFK was assassinated by the CIA, but I'm not researching any of the points. So I'm just going, if these things are true, then that is almost certainly the right outcome to make. But the reality is I would have to go in and do all the research. I'm not going to, nor is anybody else. The reality is that you are going to live largely by heuristics. People are going to make these shortcuts. So what I'm saying is,
can I just,
let me finish this point.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that you have this world where humans need heuristics. And so somebody puts out a compelling argument that they follow. They now have their shortcut in their mind to what happened. Oh, January 6th wasn't an insurrection. Cool. I know my talking point there. And now you've got people going, I'm not going to debate all of these points. And so everybody begins to fracture into 1,000 little silos. And what people end up realizing is I either have to go and debate these one by one. A lot of these things I think are so stupid, I don't want to. So I hope people use a threshold of public awareness with like that veracity of belief. And then the other is to understand if you don't attack them, what you're doing is you're left with the option to manipulate. And this is what I see the elites doing. This is what I think so many people on the right are pushing back on, is that they can tell they're being manipulated. Now, the people, the elites, just to use the word that people use, they feel like I'm so smart that I actually understand what's good for everybody. And since I don't have the time nor the will to go out and convince them, and they may not even be convincible, I'm just going to move them silently along in the right direction. And I think that manipulation is excruciatingly dangerous.
Okay. The first thing I just wanted to say is, I don't know if you're aware of this or not. You have a lot of very good, or from my perspective, you have a lot of very good thought processes. The idea of what you just said right there, that your mind, you try to structure your mind in that you're justifying your conclusions, and you view those conclusions as justified. But if the legs of the table are removed, that the conclusion no longer follows, is a very, very good thought process to have. That if somebody tells me a particular thing and they're like, hey, did you know that a recent study just came out, and if you drink 4 Pepsis in one day, you're going to die? Well, now how do you feel about Pepsis? That your answer shouldn't necessarily be like, you can either say, I don't trust this, so I don't believe it. Or you can say, well, okay, yeah, I'm going to stop drinking Pepsi. Or like the best thought process if you can is like, if that's true, then I would say that, yeah, Pepsi's horrible, right? When you structure your thoughts like that, you give yourself emotional wiggle room in the future, because now you're not like a slave to whatever idea that you've identified yourself with in an irremovable context. You've given yourself like a psychological out, and it's just a really good way to frame your thoughts. I hear you speak like that a lot, where you're like, oh, given this, like for the JFK assassination thing, right? That like, well, if everything said in this book is true, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't, I don't have time to fact check everything, but if it's true, then I believe this. But if I were to discover something different, I would change my belief, obviously, right? Being able to update your beliefs based on acquisition of information is so important. You said so many huge things. We could spend 15 hours talking about everything you just said there. But I had a viewer email me once. I get a lot of emails. A lot of my viewers give me a lot of really good information. And he called this like the magic box idea. And he said that basically the idea was if you go to ride a horse, you basically know what's going on. You're getting on top of a big creature. You feed him. You kick him. You know what's going on. Have you used an abacus before?
Maybe in grade school.
Okay, there's no room on the abacus for the government to spy on you. You see every single thing going on. You know what's happening. What's happened is in our life, as technology has grown, and technology represents like this accumulation of information passed on through generations, right? As technology has grown and the devices that we use become more and more sophisticated, they require a greater level of understanding to even know what's happening. And as you become more abstracted and removed from that underlying process, it becomes so much easier for conspiracies to manifest just because you don't know what it is that you're engaging with, right? This applies to not just cell phones, but it applies to every single thing in our lives, right? Where when I talk to people about government conspiracies or anything, like I notice for a lot of people, they just don't know how any of this works. They have no idea how any part of the government works. They don't know how any part of the military works. And it's like, that's like, if they understood this thing, then they'd have like 98% different opinions on a particular thing. If they just understood more about like the underlying stuff. The magic box thing is a concept. All this to say that you were kind of speaking about how like we become so specialized, and so conspiracies are manifesting more because we're kind of like in our own little worlds. Like I agree that that's an issue. When you talk about like wanting to debate every single thing or attack every single thing,
that meets a threshold. I just want to be clear about that.
Okay. That's a really important qualifier, but even the threshold is difficult because it's like now in my mind, there are so many things that are exceeding that threshold in terms of what percentage of the population believes in it that I just don't think are really worth debating. When I say not
Why
worth,
not? What
so when I say not worth
assumption?
debating, what I mean is that like I think that there are there are some ideas that lack any reasonable justification. We can dive into like empirical discussions on these particular things, and having a conversation about these things is a waste of time, and there's only so much time and there's only so much attention that you can give because the world is a complicated place. And the issue too is that like when you have certain ideas, there are people who have a conclusion and they want it, and they will just hop from bad idea to bad idea to bad idea to bad idea. And to spend your time going through each of these is excruciatingly painful. For me, the example, I don't know your position on vaccines or any of that stuff too. So we might, if these are major areas of disagreement, we can always talk with them or, whatever. But
I can sum up my belief or my position on literally everything by saying, what leads us to human flourishing?
Sure.
It needs to be KPI based. We have a number.
Sure.
I can go into my whole detail on that, but just by way of quick note, that's that.
Gotcha. Sure. Okay. For vaccine stuff, this is probably one of the first areas that I became like very knowledgeable in. What I found was there would be a new conspiracy. It might be what did ADE stand for? Something acquired development. Basically, like you could give a vaccine, it would make the virus resistant to your immune system, and then the virus became like a super virus. This was a big thing for a while, and then it was the Died Suddenly documentary where huge strings of stuff, and then it was like myocarditis and pericarditis, and then it was myocarditis for young men, and it was just like every single week. What did Dr. Malone say? What was on the last Joe Rogan show? What did RFK say? About the polio vaccine, and what is like and what I realized is like I'm debating like a new topic every single week just to say the exact same thing. And the evidence for my argument is overwhelming. And the evidence for these other arguments that I'm having to swat down is non-existent. Like, why am I having so many debates on is hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin valid treatments for COVID-19?
Do you have an answer though?
What?
Do you have an answer to why so many conspiracies won't go away?
Yes. Yeah. We'll get there. That's part of my next thing. But just to say that in wrapping this up, that you can only talk about so many things. Like when I go live, like sometimes I'm fighting on a certain thing and then I realize like 8 hours have passed. I'm like, fuck, I wanted to read this today, or like I wanted to go over this. And like I've just spent so much time like arguing about this particular thing. And obviously the for whatever reason right now, we can only have about one idea in our head at a time as a country, right? Like who knows? There was a recent attack in Khan Yunis, I think, or it might have been the Al-Mawasi beach in Israel, Palestine. Nobody knows about that. Nobody cares about the Gaza Strip anymore. Nobody cares about Ukraine anymore. Now it's election time, right? Nobody cares about, we have like one idea at a time. So basically to say that like, there's only so much time to talk about things. And if we have to deal with every single dog shit idea, we don't have time to talk about like the important conversations. So you asked like, where do these come from? What's happening? You mentioned something about how there's like a weird social media thing and there are elites that manipulate people. I think that their weird social media thing is all of these alternative media influencers do not do any reading or any homework. I don't expect the average person to sit and autistically, read like, oh, what did the New England Journal of Medicine say? Oh, well, unless I got to read all of Robert's opinion on the Supreme Court case. I wouldn't expect a normal person to do that. I wouldn't expect them to want to do that. But my God, none of these streamers do. None of these YouTubers do. Nobody in alternative media does. I don't think there's a single person out there that I saw give their take on the Chevron case, on the Trump immunity case. Nobody read any of the cases. They didn't even read the syllabus for the Supreme Court decision, which is like 15 pages. And these are small pages. There's not like 15 like huge pages. It's like Harry Potter pages. That's not acceptable. And you end up in this world where all of these alternative media influencers have huge incentives to lie to you, to sell you conspiracies. They make a fuck ton of money, like hyping you up. They make bad predictions. Tim Pool is going on right now on Twitter about how like, oh yeah, this is no sane person thinks that this was a normal shooting. This is definitely a conspiracy. I tweeted out, I was like, well, let's spend $10,000 on it. If you're so confident, no response. Why not? You're so confident. You should be willing to give me odds on that if you're that confident. But they're not. There's no accountability mechanism. Nobody keeps track of like all the lies that people say. And I think that right now there are so many people scattered across media that are just repeating these horrible talking points with no research, with no backing to anything they're saying, and it is destroying the discourse. Go ahead.
Dude, you make a ton of points, and as we're sitting here, I am reminded why I think you're such an important part of the sense-making apparatus. And so the overarching theme of why I wanted to speak to you is I think that I'm so driven by what's the outcome that you desire. So I'm trying to piece together what you want. I'm trying not to paint what I want onto you. What you want is to make sure that people are voting for the right candidate who you see as Joe Biden, that you have tried these very sensible debates that you've done historically, but don't feel that they were very fruitful. And you've gotten to a point now where you realize to dial up the voters on your side and to dampen the enthusiasm of the voters on the other side. You are running a new tactic, which is this hyper aggressive. You use the word bully, so I'll use that as shorthand. I'm sure it's more complicated than that.
Bullying is good.
But
I'll
yeah,
take it,
you
like you said, some leaders encourage you to move. Some leaders say we should, help people that are falling behind. Other people bully people. It's an important social mechanism.
Yeah, you definitely bullied in that the 1v10 Twitter space that you did, which I highly encourage people to check out, was utterly fascinating. But that is the tactic that you're using to get the outcome that you want that I just laid out. Now, part of the issue is you and I diverge very much in the local outcome that we want. So I don't know that we would disagree on human flourishing, but that would require a lot of definitions anyway. So I'll leave that aside. But the outcome that I want right now is to make sure that we bring order to social media, cultural and political discourse. So when we got the printing press, we got a lot of religious wars. When we had governments or written language, we suddenly had governments and taxation because they could be tracked. And I'm saying now that we have the internet and social media, we are living through just a complete form shift of culture where it is, we're finding our way to what the new normal is going to look like. And I can see coming out of the gate, one of these really big things that we're going to have to contend with is, what do you do as conspiracies multiply and lies can move faster than the truth? You can make a lie a lot sexier because you can just simplify it into an easy marketing message. But we are going to have to deal with that. And so my thing that I put forth is you want to have a threshold, and no one person is going to attack everything. So you pick the ones that you think yield the highest outcome towards where you're headed, would be my advice. Where you want to move people would be my advice. But that I don't see any way around that, because to your earlier point about we want dynamic tension, I don't think you get that dynamic tension when you have like all these fractaling conspiracy theories where we're no longer living in the same place. And now it becomes very easy to distract people just with a new shiny thing that people are going to run over to. And so if you think of it as cards scattered all over the floor, you have to like bring them back together. And as you sort of reorganize them, it's very messy for a while. But the goal is to re-put them in order. And so my very simple thesis on how you re-put these things into order is you first have to agree, where are we trying to end? So for you, elect Biden. Number two is, what are the things that people believe that are stopping me from doing that? Okay, what subset of those do I have the time, the knowledge, whatever to solve? And then you put together your best arguments and you revolve around those. The one thing I will add that the average person probably isn't thinking about is you need some sort of KPI that will indicate whether you're making progress towards that goal or not. I won't pretend to have that in my head right now, but that's going to be important so you can judge whether you're making progress or not. Now, what I see you doing is going, I now think that bullying is the best way to move my candidate forward. And in doing so, my estimation is you have just ejected yourself from the sense-making apparatus, period. How does that feel? Are you like, yeah, but I don't care? Or
I'm not proud of my media appearances this year, and I don't like the positive feedback that I get from them, because I feel like I've played a dirty role in legitimizing stuff that I think is leading to the destruction of my country. I think that one of the issues that you run into, and I noticed this, I used to be very concept value kind of like oriented. So for instance, when you say, this is always my biggest issue with Sam Harris, I don't know if that's where you got the human flourishing idea from, but I always feel like it's a bit of begging the question where, of course, everybody wants human flourishing, but one man's human flourishing might be another man's suffering. And even when you talk about like measuring it, like, okay, well, KPIs, well, for one guy, you know, a KPI might be there needs to be 0 gay people and 0 abortions in society. And this is like optimal human flourishing for, you know, one reason or another. So, and I'm sure you've thought about this. I'm not to imply that I'm blowing your mind. You're like, oh my God, different people can value different things. Thanks, Steven. I had no idea. Yeah. But the, yeah, I don't want to play a part in legitimizing ideas that I don't think should be treated with a level of seriousness that I've treated them with. I think that I am ashamed that I've walked away from conversations with Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, Candace Owens, where I let them say things in front of me that I should have spent the rest of that conversation trying to make them feel as stupid as possible for saying something so unfathomably outlandish. Yeah, that should have been the rest of the conversation. And there would have been some people that would have just not liked my appearance. They would have seen me as more divisive. But there would have been some people that were like, oof, well, that is kind of embarrassing, I guess, maybe. Or you have planted the seeds of doubt. I would have far preferred that than all of the comments of like, wow, you guys spoke together and you did merry-go-round and it was so nice and kumbaya. And it's like, this guy's fucking insane. This guy's crazy. I don't want to be a part of that anymore. I can't do it because I legitimately think that we are hurtling off of a cliff right now. And I think that a lot of it has gotten there because conservatives have been allowed to just operate with impunity in the media space. And they have so many clever little tricks in order to avoid any sort of accountability. Yeah, it's unreal to me. You mentioned those 3 things before, right? And these are like the 3 things, I guess, in a very aggressive sense that I'm focusing on now with conservatives. Is one is there was an insurrection led by Donald Trump. Is undeniable. We can go through the facts of all of this, and no reasonable mind can disagree here, and I will. And I've never had a person fight me strongly on this and disagree. The best you can do at the very end is say, okay, fine, it was an insurrection, but it was worthwhile. The second thing is you need to contend with the fact that, and you need to at least be willing to admit that Donald Trump has historically escaped accountability in a way that no president ever has, ever, right? He escaped impeachment in the Senate because Republicans falsely assumed that, oh, you can't impeach a guy who's not in office anymore. He escaped... the Supreme Court was willing to axe part of the 14th Amendment for him and say, well, we don't actually agree with this, with Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, so we're just going to say that that doesn't apply anymore, right? They literally changed the amendment to make sure that he could still run and be listed on the ballot in Colorado. Now the Supreme Court has come out with an unbelievable immunity ruling for the President of the United States, saying that in certain areas, the President is unimpeachable. I shouldn't say unimpeachable as a general noun. You can't be held criminally liable. You can't even take into account his motivations when considering criminal liability, and you can't even use these actions in the furtherance of other crimes. So it's like step after step after step, and he's pardoned like every single friend that he's had. Why would Donald Trump pardon Paul Manafort, right? I just want people to be able to verbalize that. Okay, fine, sure. Donald Trump has escaped a historic amount of accountability, probably more than any president ever has in the history of all of the United States. And then the third one is people need to contend with the fact that, my God, every single possible red flag you could ever have with a person is here. There is not a single cabinet member. He's not even running with the same vice president. Nobody that's worked for Trump likes him. Everybody's telling you this guy is a huge problem. Everybody's telling you this guy's a threat to democracy. Everybody's telling you that this is not a good man. How can we ignore every single red flag? Like, what more do you need to see? Like, what else could he possibly show you or do to show you this is a bad person? This is, I think that when I go into these conversations, I'm like, Jesus, what's happening here? I don't want to be like sitting across like, yeah, that's a totally valid point, man. Like, yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. I don't get where you're coming from. I think that is insane. I think that if you're a commentator, I can understand for a normal person, right, that like you listen and you don't really know, because my parents are like that and they now believe in every single conservative conspiracy theory. But for the media commentators, something else is going on, whether they're being paid by foreign sources, which I think happens, unfortunately, more than people know, or they're just like find their way to grift and make money because this is like the easiest way to energize and ignite people is through conspiracy theory and other nonsense.
Okay, so what do you think it is that Trump represents? So forget Trump as a guy. There are a lot of people that are on fire for him. Why? What is that?
You ever stubbed your toe before?
Yes.
When you... Dude, I bought these white blankets for my bed, and I don't know what it is, but it perfectly hides the corner of my bed. And I've kicked my fucking ankle on this thing so many times, okay? I just want to say that. No, there was a point to this. When you get upset, it can be losing a game of League of Legends. It can be, your dog just, whatever, on the floor again. It can, you stub your toe. When you get upset, that anger generates a whole lot of energy. And especially if you're a man, sometimes it comes out in violent ways. You want to hit the wall, right? That's what Donald Trump is. There's a lot of people with a lot of kind of general anxiety or angst or insecurity or feelings that something is not working right in society. Something's not okay. And we need to go back to when it was okay. And that's what Donald Trump represents.
And do you have specifics on that? What is it? What's the stubbing of the toe? Is it the economy? Is it something else entirely? Why are people mad?
That's a really tough question to answer. I think that there are so many different things at play. Like even trying to answer that question is in and of itself difficult. So like, here's a thing. When I was growing up, I'm 35. In high school, you kind of had cell phones, but not really. The first cell phone came out, the first iPhone came out, I think in 2007. You kind of had like flip phones and stuff beforehand. If you didn't have a cell phone, it wasn't like the biggest deal in the world. If you were poor and you didn't have a cell phone in 2004, it's probably okay because it's whatever. In 2024, if you're poor, you still have a cell phone. But if you have like a 7th generation old cell phone, it probably feels pretty shitty. So you're in a weird world, I think, where sometimes you've upgraded your standard of living, but even though it's increased, it somehow feels worse because now instead of like not having access to a thing at all, now you have access to the thing, but you have access to like a shitty thing. And it's like, well, I understand where the feeling comes from, but it doesn't actually map on well to reality because you have a phone. It's better than nothing, right? And it's like, well, this is bullshit. I want a better one, or I want something different. I think that there's a lot of problems, and everybody's going to get mad when I say this, but I mean, you can go and hit up the data. There's a lot of problems where people will try to say that like, like food is so expensive and unaffordable, and like this is like the average person can't afford this, and blah blah blah. And it's like, well, why haven't DoorDash and Uber Eats like gone out of business? How are people still affording this? Like as a person that grew up decently middle class and then became super working poor and then went to being like a streamer to become incredibly wealthy, I cannot imagine as a working poor person fucking Uber Eatsing or Door Dashing. Holy shit. I get like a hot chocolate and a bagel in the morning and it costs me like $25. If I was working there, I would never be ordering this stuff. Or people will look at like home ownership stuff. And I think that there's a human tendency to nostalgize. There's a verb that I'm looking for. You hold the past with higher regard than it actually was. And now I've hit the age where people say things and I'm like, excuse me? I saw a girl on TikTok several months ago and she was like, rent is unaffordable. Nobody knows how hard it is for us kids anymore. 20 years ago, you could work a minimum wage job and have your own 2-bedroom apartment. And I'm like, excuse me, 18 years ago, I worked at McDonald's. I got $5.15 an hour. You better believe I had roommates, okay? It was a girlfriend, but like, there's no way you could afford. But people think, if you ask somebody, like, do you think that people owned more homes on average, like in the 1900s, 1920s, 1930s, 40s, 50s? People are like, yeah, for sure. No, they didn't. Home ownership rates are about as they always have been from generation to generation. They're more or less on track to be the same, but it doesn't feel that way. As for why, there's 20 other examples that I could go into, but I would say that the biggest thing that has made a huge impact on our lives that nobody wants to talk about because it's not sexy and you can't really ideologically load it is the internet. It's changed in an unbelievably short amount of time, right? When I was a kid, the internet didn't really exist. It was like AOL keyword. It was like kind of there. Maybe you had a family computer, maybe not. If you didn't, it's not like you were missing it. Nobody was like, oh no, I don't have a computer in the internet. If you had it, it was cool, whatever. And now it is an irremovable part. I don't even know how I lived without a fucking cell phone. Like, how do you go out and meet friends and not be able to call them when you're traveling? You just like, you were like shot into space and you hope that you met up at the right places. And it's like, well, it's 4:30. Like, Ron's probably at, John's house. Let's go and check it out. Let's go bike down there. You didn't know, you had no idea. Maybe you call his parents. You're like, when was the last time? Yeah. But the world has changed so much. And we don't pay any attention to that because it's hard for either side to weaponize it, I think.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Income inequality is definitely a huge part of the problem. I think you've got income inequality. You have a meaning crisis, which I think is really a big problem right now. You have a breakdown between the sexes. And so
that's a big one too.
You start putting all of that together, and I just don't know the data well enough to know how much I should also be including the drug epidemics that we're having. But certainly in terms of health, people are also knocking themselves out of whack from a hormonal standpoint. So there's all this stuff going on inside the body. There's the breakdown of the standard fabric of time where if you wanted to get laid, there was no access to a lot of porn. You had to take the risk. You were constantly around other people. There weren't the distractions of the cell phones. You couldn't be bullied endlessly no matter where you were. I mean, that is something that for a kid absolutely terrifies me. Jonathan Haidt's work, I think, is really interesting. Abigail Schreier and the whole thing around therapy, having gone too far and beginning to separate kids from their parents in terms of who are they taking advice from, all of that stuff. These all feel like cultural, societal trends that are pushing us in a direction. And we can get so much information so rapidly that we then lead to what I was talking about earlier, where it's what I call the age of conspiracy, but it's really just everybody has these different narratives. In business, I think about this a lot because my job is to go, all right, there are all these dots. There's what's performing in our business. There's the realities of YouTube. There's what we're trying to do in video games. These are all dots. Then I have to string a line around all of that makes a coherent shape where I can say, these are the dots and this is what they mean. This is the narrative. And then I give them that narrative. That narrative has to be clear enough, simple enough that they can transmit it to each other, that they can transmit it to the outside world. But the problem is I need to intoxicate them with certainty about it. I have to make them believe in it like that is the gospel truth. And if you follow that, we're going to go somewhere great. But then I peel off and I go in a room and go, the only thing I know is that something in this narrative is broken. Now, with the internet, you have a gazillion sets of narratives. All of them are broken. And we cannot figure out a method by which we go through and orient people to how the world actually works. And this is the breakdown. I was thinking the other day during a podcast where it might have been better when we could control the narrative. By better, I mean human flourishing, right? That's just always what I'm thinking about. It is entirely possible that when you're being manipulated by a small group of people towards a measurable and positive outcome, that you're actually getting closer to human flourishing than this moment now where we don't yet know how to deal with it. And there's just narratives everywhere. They're all colliding. Nobody knows what to make sense of anything. And because of all those breakdowns, we have this rise in populism because people don't feel like they're going to do better than their parents. And so they just are in this malaise. They don't know how to move forward. Somebody comes along and says, I know how you feel, and I'm going to make you feel better. And throughout all of human history, that's all that it's taken. But for even somebody like me, this feels like this incredibly deranged moment where the dynamic tension at some point snapped. And now we're in this moment where these two sides are just flying off into oblivion. And that's the thing that worries me. Now, I don't know what your stance is, but where do you think this goes? Because my initial reaction to your change in tone was, I'll agree with you that the right's been saying crazy shit forever. But to me, the left has also been saying crazy shit forever. And now you, the person that for the last year, 2 years, whatever, was the eminently reasonable guy, has suddenly become the face of ratcheting up the tensions. Now, because I have an algorithm running in my brain that says it is inevitable that we will end up in either a war with an outside power or at war with ourselves. Just the math of how empires fall is just, it's undeniable. So it is an inevitability from my standpoint. And what just happened with the assassination attempt, you became the face of, we just ratcheted that up.
So my goal is to make people realize that it has been ratcheted up. The assassination attempt didn't change much. If it felt like it, it's because you haven't been paying attention. Not you personally, or maybe you personally, but just in general, that like the things have been getting crazier and crazier and crazier. But because we have a way to navigate the world and not see the impacts immediately of these crazy things we believe, we're allowed to be crazy and not realize it for longer periods of time. There was a, did you watch that Chernobyl miniseries?
Yeah.
I think What was the name of the main character? Some weird Eastern European name.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking
but
about.
yeah, he mentions at the end when he's breaking down how the reactor ended up failing. He says there's a quote that he has where it's like every single time you lie, you pay a debt to the truth, and eventually that debt has to be incurred. And I think the issue right now is because of how abstracted all of our beliefs are, that debt, we're running on a lot of credit, right? That if two people were to step outside and one guy were to say, I think you can eat a rock and be totally fine, and another guy were to say, I don't think so, that is a belief that will exist for a brief moment in society until a person eats a rock, and then it's done. You're done. That belief is gone. You don't need to worry about it anymore because you can immediately test it and you can immediately get feedback and you can immediately see it's not good. But there's a couple of issues in society today. One has to do with how abstracted everything has gotten, that magic box thing I talked about, to where if somebody tells you so, there's a very common belief that phones are always listening to you and recording everything. This has been tested by so many people. There's no evidence for this, even though it's like my guess would be more than half of people in society believe this, like very strongly, high levels of conviction. I don't think there's ever been, unless something recent has come out, there's never actually been any proof that shows that that your phones are listening to you, even though a lot of people say, oh, I started seeing ads once I brought up this thing and I blah, 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 right? If you have beliefs that are, one, abstracted away from the thing, there's a thing that happens to where not only can you not really see the negative outcomes of said belief immediately, you're divorcing the consequence from the belief more and more and more. This in and of itself is not good for human thinking. If you've ever trained dogs or if you've trained people, it's really the same thing. Feedback has to be immediate. It needs to be appropriate, and there has to be some corrective measure that can be taken, right? If somebody does something wrong, you can't wait a week to tell them because you're just you're making bad habits and they're not going to be as receptive and they're not going to tie it to the thing as much, right? You have to have a really good system of reinforcement. It's why obesity, in my opinion, is such a huge issue. When you eat yummy food, there's an immediate good feeling, and the negative consequences really, really, really far away in time. It's hard for humans to deal with that. Climate change, I think, is a similar thing. The benefit is immediate. I get to pollute now and get something really awesome, and maybe my kids will have lung cancer 10 years earlier. I don't know, right? But it's really far removed from the current moment in time. But even worse than that, again, going back to this internet thing, not only do I have ways to put off consequences, because I can filter my world so selectively, I might be able to avoid consequences entirely. Filtering is not good when you're doing it to an aggressive amount. People would be surprised at the types of friends they could make, the people that they know, the people that they could date, if they were forced to spend time with a whole bunch of people. Given the opportunity to self-select and given the opportunity to infinitely filter, people will cut out so much of their life that was important and valuable without realizing it. And the internet has given us the ability to do that in a really, really, really negative way. An example I always give is that if one guy, grew up in the 70s and he really wanted to fuck a toaster, he's not going to be able to find anybody on the block to give him advice on that. He's probably not going to grow up fucking toasters because he's going to try it once and electrocute himself, or he's just not going to do it. But today, you could probably find a forum full of toaster fuckers that will give you the best, 27-step guide to have the best sexual experience imaginable, okay, with the best toaster built for it. This type of filtering is not good. To go back to the thesis of these 2 points, so I can believe a crazy thing, and there is no immediate corrective thing for it, right? Maybe I do think that a vaccine is 50% lethal. I mean, how am I going to test that? It's not I don't get any, and my friends don't get any. And then 2, now I can go online and I can see any documentary or any social media figure, whatever, and I can have reinforcement for that particular belief. These are 2 very, very, very bad, poisonous things for human minds because of an underlying factor, which is people are so horrendously mistaken, and they do not understand that logic and syllogisms, propositional logic philosophy, this is a very queer, unhuman thing. We have the capability for rational thought, but that's a skill that has to be developed in practice. You're not born with that. Evolution doesn't give you that. Evolution doesn't create somebody with the purpose of making them discern truth as well as possible. It creates something that can survive long enough to pass on your genes and take care of your kin. That's it. There's no reason for you to assume that your brain is uniquely equipped to be this logic machine. It's not. We're not computers. So people have this mistaken assumption that, well, if I just put myself in any information environment, whatever, I'm always going to be able to figure things out eventually, or I'm sure that truth is being delivered to me in some way, size, shape, or form. No, we're pleasure seeking. At the end of the day, all humans are pleasure seeking machines. It's up to you to create the systems in your mind to make truthful things feel good, or if they don't feel good, have the discipline to understand fuck, this sucks, whatever. I have to do this thing anyway. This is one of the reasons why this is a whole other thing. We don't have to get into this, but one of the things that drives me the craziest about all these red pill losers is every single time, if somebody gives you an uncomfortable truth, If somebody's going to give you, here's an easy way to tell if you're bullshitting yourself. If somebody gives you an uncomfortable truth, and every single time you walk away with that uncomfortable truth, feeling like amazingly empowered and hyped and ready to go, you're not getting an uncomfortable truth. They're giving you a fucking hype speech disguised with bullshit, okay? If somebody's giving you this uncomfortable truth and they're saying something, like, listen, at the end of the day, you're the only one that can take care of yourself. It's all about you. Nobody's going to take care of you. And you're like, yeah, fuck yeah, that's awesome, right? That's not an uncomfortable truth. You're getting a pep speech, right? If somebody's giving you an uncomfortable truth, you should walk away, in my opinion, feeling pretty shitty about it, right? If somebody comes up to you and they're like, listen, you know what? You're 32 years old. You haven't talked to your parents in 5 years. Grow the fuck up and call them. Call them, because when your parents are gone, they're gone forever. Call them, right? And you should be like, fuck. Yeah, maybe. That should be your feeling afterwards. But people dress up stuff so much. There's a whole other thing of like that. Like people have taken on the aesthetic of all these things instead of like the thing itself. Being a centrist or whatever is one of them. I think cautiously, because I don't know all your beliefs, but you seem to be a person who is decently well put together. I would consider myself in a lot of ways kind of like a centrist type person. I'll never identify that way because there are so many things already that I say that if I was listening to it, I would say that's a red flag. Like there are things that I say where it's like, that guy says that he's not partisan. He does his own research. He moves independently. That's all bullshit. Don't believe that guy. Everybody that says that is full of fucking shit. And I say so many of these things already, and then I have to justify every single one afterwards because people wear these as an aesthetic. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, go.
So explain to me, that's interesting. And it may be that you just have a beef with people wearing it as an aesthetic, but I've heard you say it's just team sports everywhere. And I agree. I think everybody's team sports. And recently I never thought of myself as sort of anything. I don't even like politics per se. I'm obsessed with culture because I think that culture will control the quality of your life. So for instance, the first culture that you're going to be impacted by is your parents.
Family.
So you wake up one day, oh, I'm here. And my parents are either doing things that are going to help me flourish and develop my brain well and good nutrition and all of that. And they're going to fill me full of ideas that will be useful as I move forward. Or, oh God, I was born into a terrible culture and my parents ignore me, or they're doing drugs, or they're abusing me, God forbid. And it's just like, those things have such lifelong consequences. Now, I can't control who people's parents are, nor should I be able to, but I can control what their friends think is cool. And that's where I'm trying to, as a media purveyor of video games, essentially, that's where I'm trying to intercept people. And once you understand, oh, these ideas, they all really matter. Then it's like, okay, we need to focus on what are the ideas that are actually effective. We have to figure that out. So I don't want to be put in a camp. I don't want to be said that I'm red, blue. And so I started thinking, okay, is the center a destination? Is it actually a knowable place that you can go to? Or is it simply that you're milquetoast and you're refusing to go red or blue? And the reason I think it's a destination is I would, for anybody that's going to use centrist in a way that I will resonate with, because even as I say the word, it sounds so weak and just disgusting. But the reason that I would love to see somebody come up with a cool phrase for this is, here is how life actually works. We are in a world with rules, physical rules that can't be violated. And so once you understand, oh, wait a second, I can master the rules of the game and I can do things that other people can't do. Amazing. Then I'm going to come in and I'm going to start figuring out what I need to get good at in order to achieve the goals that I want to have. And so I feel like my life is the expression of that. I'm a guy with a roughly average IQ. I don't want to debate that with people. So if people think I'm a little smarter than average, fine. If you think I'm a little less than average, fine, great. It doesn't matter. The results of my life followed a very specific, mappable, explainable process that I walked down. So I bring that to being a centrist and saying, all I'm talking about being in the center is there are a bunch of ideas. The ideas will yield different outcomes. Sometimes the team on the left is going to be thinking about an idea that's more useful. Sometimes it will be the team on the right. And sometimes it's the dynamic tension you were talking about before. And as we see them fight, we see what the real answer probably is. And thank God we have this structure here in America where the system sort of is designed to gridlock so that we don't make changes too rapidly. But if people go, oh, I'm going to make all of my decisions not based on a team narrative, because I know the narrative is going to be broken in some way, though it is a lovely shortcut where I have to do less work. But instead, I'm going to say, if we do this policy, I expect this outcome. Now, if I do that policy and I get that outcome, I'm going to keep doing that policy. If I do that policy and I don't get that outcome, something in my predictive machine is broken. To me, that's the center. You're just like, I'm going to state my outcome. In fact, I want to go back to that. There was something you said earlier. I'm not going to be able to tie it back now, but people end up just by saying what outcome they want, they reveal themselves. And if you just ask them, where are you trying to go? Then you can begin to understand, oh shit, remember, you're just trying to tease out three things. Their biology you're going to get in the interactions. That's largely for things like this, just intellect. And then the other is their beliefs and their values. And so running something as a thought experiment, how they would answer it, cool, now I understand something about your values. Now I know how I can leverage you and your thinking if I'm trying to make sense of something. That to me is where this gets interesting, which is why, and sorry to keep coming back to this, but you matter to me as a part of the sense-making apparatus, but your whole thing now is I'm going to bully people because I think it's a tactic that's been underutilized.
Only the people that I think have unacceptable thought patterns right now. They shouldn't,
But
just to be clear.
To your earlier point, there's a finite amount of time, and there are two things that may come. If I think of you as a brand for a second, and when you first came out and said what you said about Corey, and I have no sympathy for anybody that gets killed at one of these rallies, you're voting for a traitor. I was like, anybody that says that they don't have sympathy for somebody, I now understand that they've gone tribal. And so now I'm just going to discount everything. But you had built up enough credibility with me that I went and watched your stream. And so I'm watching your stream, and two things happened. One, you were pointing out things I was like, I don't know about those things. So if I'm going to have an opinion, I need to go either decide that you're going to be my heuristic and I'm just going to believe what you're saying, or I need to go research them. But you were also so entertaining that I could see the seeds of a new WWE version of you arising that may actually be more effective. And I don't know yet. I can't see far enough into the future to know. However, I do know that there are always second and third order consequences. So the question becomes, what are going to be the second and third order consequences to another important piece of, again, this is my bias. I'm trying to bring people together. What you're doing now will not bring people together. It will shove them farther apart.
Maybe.
And that's interesting. I want to hear how that's maybe. In fact, why is that maybe? What else? How could that bring us together?
Sure. Have you ever heard of the concept of moral hazard? You brought up
I've heard the phrase, but I don't know what it means.
I think it has to do with like the freeloader problem. I think moral hazard is when you go to consume a particular good or service, but there's no cost associated with the consumption. So you would consume it infinitely, because why not? If I were to say like, hey, you have access to free massages, you might get like 20 massages a day. I think that's considered the concept of moral hazard, and it leads to things like the free rider problem. If I'm incorrect about that, edit that out. No, I'm just kidding. The free rider problem is solved, generally speaking. No, not generally speaking, always. It's solved by forcing somebody to incur a cost for their behavior. And I think that we have tricked ourselves socially into thinking that some behaviors can be done with no cost. And one of the things that I would argue is, I will appeal lightly to evolution, and I'll say that it's probably pretty important that people, their self-image is made up a lot of how people around them view them. Now, obviously, I'm sure you probably have to spend a lot of time fighting that. I have to spend a lot of time fighting that. When you're in media or when you're trying to like move forward in like business or whatever, there's going to be some people that gravitate more towards that, find a nicer word for sociopathic, but these people that aren't as influenced by the thoughts and views of people around them, and that's probably a good thing. Okay, I like that. I appreciate myself. I don't know if society functions if everybody's like me, right? If everybody's like, I don't actually give a fuck what any of these people think. Fuck you. And it's like, okay, well, my tribe is dying, okay? Because sometimes it's nice to have a bunch of people that are like, we have to do this thing, right? Everybody's gonna think I'm an asshole if I don't do this particular thing, you know? It wouldn't work if everybody was like, had my type of mind, right? There's a certain type of thing that's good. And that type of thing is, there's like a social pressure that moves people in a certain direction by setting the maximum boundaries of permissible behavior. And in evolutionary biology, I think we refer to this concept as, have you ever heard of tit for tat?
Yeah.
In a tit for tat system, tat is not evil, it's essential. You have to make sure that there are corrective mechanisms for tit behavior, that if somebody does a wrong, there has to be a tat to correct the behavior and to discourage the behavior. And this is something that has taken me a great deal of time to figure out, and I'm still working on it. And we talked a little bit personally before this about an issue that I have, like being mean to people, is sometimes you get into this habit when you're dealing with people personally, where you don't want to set healthy boundaries between you and the other person because you kind of feel bad telling another person what they can do, and you end up being kind of a pushover. And you're actually making two people worse off there. You're making yourself worse off, which is immediately noticeable because now you feel like shit because you've got people that walk all over you, but you're also making the other person worse off because assuming this is a person that loves you, cares for you, wants to be your friend, they would appreciate, like, if you imagine, like, any person that has trouble setting boundaries, if you would ask them, well, what if your friend told you, hey, I'm not really comfortable when you do X, Y, Z? That person would almost always say, oh yeah, of course, I would never do that again, right? So you're making yourself worse off and you're making the other person worse off. So you're in a world where when you set boundaries for behavior for other people and you all have better guidelines for how to act, it actually improves everybody's behavior. It makes everybody happier, even though that might seem a little bit counterintuitive initially. So I think in a tit for tat system, if you allow some people to run around without the tat and they can just tit all day, that introducing back some of that tat and saying, hey, if you're involved in this behavior and you end up, like, something bad happens to you, like, bro, it's a fuck around, find out situation. This is ridiculous. This is stupid. If something happens, I mean, like, it's sad. Like, I mean, like, nobody, nothing bad. We don't want bad things to happen to people, but, like, damn, like, what the fuck did you expect? You're jumping into a pool that says warning sharks and then you get eaten by a shark. I mean, like, I don't want anybody to get eaten by sharks, but what did you expect to happen? There has to be that, like, cultural corrective mechanism. And right now, in my opinion, in the United States, it does not exist for conservatives. There's none of it. It doesn't exist at all. Trump is deranged, and he says so many deranged things. And for you to even bring that up, oh, you've got Trump derangement syndrome, or you just want to call us fascists and Nazis. Meanwhile, if you've been living in the United States, conservatives called Democrats commies for like 20 years. We've always done this name calling thing. Why are we pretending like it's unique now? And the liberals just spent 2 weeks hand wringing over Biden's senility, and meanwhile Donald Trump just picked his vice presidential candidate is another guy who said Donald Trump was like Hitler. Like, even his vice presidential candidate says it. But you don't see any of that corrective mechanism on the conservative side. You've never seen a Fox News broadcast like, did Trump go too far with this? No, you see just the opposite. You see leaked messages from Tucker Carlson where he's saying behind the scenes, Sidney Powell, what did he say? I fucking hate her or something. He's like, he's unhinged. He hates this lady. But when he goes on to Fox News, it's like they're on brand. They're unified. They always have the same messaging. And it's like, what's happening here? So you asked me, how could you possibly create a less divisive environment? And I think it's because it's like disciplining a child or training a dog or setting a boundary with a friend, that sometimes enforcing types of acceptable behavior does actually make for a more cohesive and better environment, because just letting people run amok without any sort of corrective mechanism creates the most divisive environment, which I think is where we're at now.
All right. So I'll make a pitch that you're looking at that wrong, and we'll see how far I get. Yeah. So the tit for tat strategy is really fascinating. For people that don't know the background, it's basically computer simulation that they ran, and they tried to come up with all these really complex systems where the two AIs are basically trying to work together. And I forget, it's like, I'll give you 50 cents if you give me 50 cents, but the other person can just take all the money if they want. And so there's this moment of trust. And this is where the idea of tit for tat comes in. So they ran all these really complicated strategies. Like every fifth time that you give somebody, you then take something away. And the thing that ended up winning was tit for tat. Until they found, so the way that tit for tat would go would be, I come in assuming that you're going to be good. And if you bite me, then I bite you back.
Yeah.
And where I think you're running that version of the strategy. So it's like, okay, cool. I just did my year's worth of going on all these nice podcasts with all these wonderful people, walked away hating it, thinking that it didn't go anywhere. What a waste of time. I was civil. I accidentally moved the Overton window into a smaller zone. I think it's all crazy, and I'm not going to do that anymore. And so that is them, as the Brits would say, taking the piss. So there is our titter tat. I forget which is the good and which is the bad. But now that I'm past that, gloves are off. You've said things. I'm never going to back down, apologize. The next generation can come behind me and they can show sympathy. It is not going to be me. Like, gloves are off. Fuck these guys. Now, in the actual tit for tat thing that they ran, what they found was the one that actually beat tit for tat was where you did tit for tat, but you assumed again that they were going to be good. So they would default again to, rather than tit for tatting each other into oblivion, if you chill and you turn around and you now give you treat this well and treat it equal, whatever word they would use, then I'll go back to treating you well. And so there's a mechanism to pull out of the death spiral. And that's the part that I would love to see, because is trying to bring everybody back to the middle. Like we are just dialed to 11 after the assassination attempt on Trump. Dude, I'm sure you have, because you go through a lot of this stuff, but the rhetoric is people are saying, this is literal war. I want blood. Like it's really, really ramped up. And because the way that I view society is that at any moment you can hit black ice and you're driving on a normal road, everything seems fine. And then all of a sudden you don't have control of the car. And it happens so fast. Now, you may just sort of spin for a minute and you go lightly into a snowbank and all is fine. Or you go careening off a cliff, smash into the kids walking along the street, and you do a lot of damage on the way down. It's hard to know. But what I'm trying to do is avoid us hitting that black ice. This is why I'm becoming sort of a RFK stan.
Sure.
Now, I admittedly don't know him well enough, so I'm sure you could pull out a lot of stuff and I'd be like, yeah, this stuff is crazy, and now you're just leaving me hopeless. But the reason that I like him is he gives me something to move towards. He gives me a positive message of unity. So how does that land in terms of the way you've approached this? Like, it's a hard line.
Yeah, maybe you've taken me too seriously, or maybe I expressed myself poorly. I mean, like, obviously, if I felt like conservative discourse became more reasonable, I would return to the more reasonable thing. I just don't. It just hasn't happened. I never heard what you just described, so it's cool that I learned something. Although I think I intuitively, or maybe I did hear it, that like if you're in like a tit for tat system and the other side keeps misbehaving, that you start aggressively fucking them over. But then when they go back to like a tit for tat, then you return as well, and then you continue to do this, right? Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that you would allow for some bad behavior, but if they go back, you would go back, because if you don't, then you death spiral, which is bad. The issue is that I feel like we've done this for years, where it's just liberals apologizing over and over and over again. And I don't think conservatives have taken responsibility for a single horrible thing that they've done over the past 8 years in this country. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. That's an issue. And if that's not going to change, because if you must agree that having for the tit for tat, that going back is essential. You made that argument, so I assume, and I agree with you there. But you must also agree that tit organism won't survive in any social circle, because something is going to come along that will, tat and destroy it, right? If this creature never responds, then you're just going to be taken advantage of. You're going to be freeloaded on, and everything is going to be gone. And even after, like, you know what happened? I was in a city, and I didn't have anything to do for that day, and I was hanging out, and I was just reading. And the assassination attempt, played out. And my first instinct was, because my first instinct whenever something like this happens is usually I'll take to Twitter, and usually I'll say, regardless of what's going on, violence is like never acceptable. We don't want to get to a point to where like people are killing each other. It's just not good. There's no reason. Nobody's starving to death in the United States now. Nobody's like dire of a strait. This doesn't need to be violent. And I open Twitter and I start looking and I start thinking, and I'm seeing all this crazy talk about how the liberals were the one, saying they called him a Nazi, they called him Hitler, what'd you expect? And then I start thinking, and I'm like, have conservatives ever said, hey, we need to dial it down after January 6th? Hey, we need to dial it down after, after like these, this leaked conversation from Trump, like, hey, we need to dial it down after, like the Dominion and the Putin and the voting stuff, or we need to dial it down after the Never. Not a single fucking time, not even one time has there been there have been some Republicans that have done it, and they are immediately excised from the party, and they're never Trumpers, and they're gone forever. Their political careers are over. So I think I tweeted out that I was conflicted. I wasn't sure. And then a bunch of people start pushing me. What do you mean you're conflicted, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm still like looking at the media landscape, and I'm looking at like all the Tim Pools and all these other people that kind of exist in my sphere, the Constantines or whatever. And I realized not a single one of these fucking assholes is going to say that Donald Trump's rhetoric contributed to any of this. None of them will admit that. Not a single person. So why in the fuck am I going to get on my knees and say, oh my God, what happened to this guy was so tragic. Like, we got to do better, guys. When these motherfuckers are the ones that are driving up the temperature to an unbearable limit. And not only are they the ones pushing the temperature up, that is the singular reason why they prefer Donald Trump, is because of his rhetoric. Sure as fuck isn't policy. Anybody that says that is lying. I'll debate or argue with any of those people, because all you have to ask them are, what are 3 policies from Donald Trump you like? They're going to say like, the wall, tax cuts, and that's it. The wall isn't even a policy, right? So if they're not going to accept any responsibility for any of it, right? Like, in my mind, this is another thing where I would say no reasonable mind can disagree. If I were to ask you who is the singular person responsible for turning up the temperature on political discourse over the past 8 years, the answer is Donald Trump. It's not even close. Nobody else even comes close to Donald Trump on that one. And I don't believe any reasonable mind can disagree, and I would fight to the death on that. But like, conservatives will say, well, what about the one speech where Biden, it was like a blue,
Yes.
red, blue, and they zoom in on the one thing, and they're like, he's got the red background. And it's like, really? And they're like, well, he said MAGA Republicans. And it's like, yeah, right after that, he says it's not all Republicans, it's just the people that are denying the election. Why is it that you can take one line from Biden and use that to impugn his entire speech and his entire character? Meanwhile, for Donald Trump, he'll give an entire speech on January 6th about fighting like hell and taking your country back. But you use one line to completely and totally validate him, saying, oh, I know you'll be marching peacefully. How can you save him with one line and destroy Biden with one line? And this happened to me on Piers Morgan, and they had an opportunity to make me look really bad because I said, and some people might have thought I looked bad anyway, but every time Piers Morgan was like, won't you apologize? And I was like, these guys won't take credit for anything. What do you like? And I think I said something like, if I can remember, it was like, yeah, liberals have been talking about how BLM and the riots were horrible and we did disavow, and Biden had to come out and say he disavows the riots, and, ask these guys what they think about January 6th. And the first thing that Ruben was like, well, that's different. Well, that's different, right? There wasn't a single event that I could give that either of those people would take any accountability or responsibility for. That environment is not a good one. I don't think there's virtue in operating as a pushover. I think that you have to show strength sometimes, and I don't mean strength like Donald Trump means, that we just bomb and kill random people or you bully people, but I mean strength in that you have values that you believe in, and when other people aren't willing to cooperate in that system, you can't keep bending over backwards to accommodate them when they won't accommodate you. That's just a parasite. That's a leech. It's not a cooperative system, and it leads to destruction, I think. When you mention like sometimes being mean to people, you ever met somebody who has like a 23-year-old that's not going to school and not working and they live at home? It's really, really, really hard. But there are times where, and this is another issue that I have, especially with centrists, okay? I don't know if you're included in this or not, but some people say that like being nice is in and of itself a virtue, just being nice to people. And sometimes, depending on the person, and I know you know this because I know everybody's had these people in their life, especially you for everything you've accomplished, is sometimes you see people and you're like, my God, you need one good friend to tell you how much of a fuck up you are, because nobody has made this clear to you. Every single person, you've got people that they navigate through life doing a bunch of assurance-seeking behavior. They manage to always find people to feel sorry for them. And it's like, bro, at some point, like somebody needs to kick you out. You got to be homeless, bro. You have to figure your shit out. Somebody needs to give you like that tough love correction where they're like, listen, I love you. I respect you. I appreciate you. You're fucking up right now and you need to change. And there's no nice way to say it. And I can help you if you want to change, but I can't help you if you're going to be like how you are anymore. This is unworkable and it's leading both of us to ruin. And that's kind of how I view conservatives of the United States right now, understanding that both my parents are hardcore conservatives and believe in every single fucking conservative conspiracy theory, as tragic and as sad as it is, that exists out there today. Yeah.
So what do you think is going to be the consequence of the rhetoric hitting the level that it is now? Is civil war a possibility, or do you think that's absurd?
In my mind, it's always been, I have no historical background for this, so actually, even in the United States, it's not true. I've said this for a long time. I don't even know if this is true, but my feeling, I guess, my intuition is that as long as people aren't like starving or they're not like homeless, like on the street, like en masse or whatever, that you're not going to see civil war. But I guess we had an actual civil war, and it's not because people were starving to death. So, is it possible? I feel like I feel like it could be. I feel like the issue is that last time, Donald Trump didn't really know what he was getting into, and he didn't know how to navigate the system appropriately. And he kind of thought, just because he doesn't seem to understand much really about anything, but especially not about government, I don't think he understood how difficult it was in the United States being president and trying to make systems work for you. But I think coming in the second time, I think he understands that a lot better. And I think that he's going to choose the people around him to be a lot more faithful and adherent to the things that he wants. And I think that's probably one of the scariest and most potentially damaging things, especially given the deference that the Supreme Court has granted presidents now to commit criminal acts. That's a really scary thing in my mind.
So paint me that picture in detail. What happens if Trump wins?
So I feel like we could see like a historic deconstruction of a lot of the federal government, like a lot of agencies either being made toothless, like conservatives seem to have this principle of just like deregulation for deregulation's sake, when it's like, well, some level of regulation is probably okay. So I think you could see like federal agencies like completely stripped away. And the sad thing is there's conservatives listening to this right now, like, yeah, that's a good thing. I think we should have them stripped away. And it's like, okay, yeah, I guess like fuck clean drinking water, or, you know, good food to eat, or, you know, safe and effective medications. I think that that's a big issue. I think that Trump will continue to foster a lot of mistrust in a lot of our institutions. And I think that remember when I laid out kind of my whole like principally building society, third-party institutions become essential because you just don't have the time to learn and understand every single thing in society. You know, when I turn the key to turn my car on, I have to trust that there are engineers that built this car to a certain standard, and there are safety regulations that are going to make it so it's not going to fucking explode, and my tires are going to fall off while I'm driving down the street. And I think that Donald Trump and his followers, his ilk, do a lot of damage and cause a lot of mistrust for a lot of institutions. I think there's a serious concern that the United States is receding. If we haven't already done irreparable harm, we're receding from being leaders of the world, which I think is really important. I just think that a lot of the benefits that we have as being leaders of the world are very intangible. Like, who the fuck cares that we can ship anything from any part of the world without a concern? Like, nobody thinks about that. But it's very tangible when there are bad things. Why are we sending money to Ukraine? That's bad. I don't like to send money to Ukraine. But like, what does it mean if something from China is cheaper than it would be otherwise if we didn't have the world's largest navy, you know? I think that these are just like, I think, outwardly broad policy and like demeanor things. This doesn't get into the scary world where Donald Trump could be like arresting political opponents, which he's tried to do in the past, where he's lying to states in order to effect certain outcomes, which he has like documented and tried to do in the past. There's like a really scary world where certain people get like thrown in jail for no reason, where different freedoms are impeded. Like he said multiple times, the media is the enemy of the people. He's talked about suspending the Constitution to search for voter fraud. He said in the past that Americans that burn the flag should have their citizenship revoked. Yeah, these are all very, very, very scary things, in my opinion. In terms of like what's possible, one thing that I'll say, like here's the thing that I'll say. In 2016, everybody was unhinged and upset when Trump became president. And everybody thought that like, okay, it was kind of wacky, you're kind of overreacting. And Trump's presidency was worse than what any reasonable person would have said it could have been in 2016. I don't think anybody saw like how crazy everything would be in terms of how he operated. So what is the next, you know, take at that going to look like now that he understands the system better? I don't know.
So with the Supreme Court decision coming out, really crystallizing the powers to not be pursued criminally that the president has,
yeah.
Do you have literal fears that he will become king-like?
The
will
problem
this
is
be
that,
our
like,
last election?
will it be our last election? Everything is so multivariate and it's hard to know. I think to know the answer to that question, I would have to know Trump. And from what I can tell, Trump just seems to be insanely narcissistic. So if Trump fancies himself a king, but he just wants to like have his last 4 years as like a fuck you, like you thought you could keep me out of office, well, I won again, so fuck you guys. Then he has his run, and then he like it's possible he's the president, he's like a lame duck. He's like, I just want to show him I can do it. Fuck these guys, and then he walks off or whatever. That's within the realm of possibility. One of the scary things about Trump is that like all possibilities are open, you know? And then there's another world where he sees like some sort of legacy about like the political establishment that he's created and then the things that he wants to leave behind potentially. And that could look a lot like some kind of kingship. I don't think that people realized it, but I think there's a strong argument to be made that Mike Pence might have been the only person that saved us from something catastrophic happening on January 6th. Mike Pence took a very strong stance at multiple stages against Donald Trump's attempt to coup the government. That's why he's not vice president this time. And that's why the guy that he chose, the J.D. Vance guy, is on record saying he would have supported Donald Trump in January 6th when he would have like flipped the election basically for Donald Trump. So like, let's say that instead of Pence, it would have been somebody that would have gone along with his scheme to declare himself the winner. I don't know what the country would have looked like then. I don't know what it'll look like next time. I don't know. But I do know that like everything is on the table, which is really scary to me.
How would the aftermath of the attempted assassination been different for you if it had been a Biden rally, someone tried to shoot Biden and killed somebody in the crowd? Would you have been, would there be sympathy for that side, or is it just the whole political machinery?
You know what? Actually, I bet there would have been a similar thought process where I'd have said, you know what? I have sympathy. I would have more sympathy. But I think I might say, you know what? Like, this is why there is no virtue in constantly, kowtowing to the other side. That, like, if you're going to sit there and let them ratchet up the temperature more and more and more and more and more and more and crank the thermostat up higher and higher and higher, and now people are getting assassinated, what the fuck did you think was going to happen? Like, are we going to get another speech? Why in the... My standards for myself and citizens is different than the president. So I'm going to criticize Biden here, but he probably did the right thing. I don't know, though. I'm 50-50 on it. I'm truly split down the middle. I don't like that Biden went on and apologized for, in a private speech to donors, he said that we need to put Trump in the bullseye for like our campaigning stuff. The fact that he apologized for that, show me a single fucking conservative that criticized Donald Trump when he said, they're coming after you for your Second Amendment rights, and I don't know if there's anything we can do about it. Well, maybe there's something the Second Amendment people can do about it, right? Show me a single fucking conservative that criticizes him for that. But there's not, because what do they say? They've created so many clever mental escapes. Well, we take Donald Trump seriously, not literally. Bullshit. What the fuck? He's a grown-ass man. When do you take him seriously but not literally? He's a fucking president of the United States. He's speaking literal words, right? And I don't believe... What?
You don't think there's something to that? Like, when I hear Trump talk, I think he's so outrageous that I'm going to take him with a grain of salt. I almost take him as a WWE wrestler, if I'm honest. Which is weird. And there's a whole conversation to be had about, is it fucking normal, useful, advantageous to have a president that you have to categorize as a WWE wrestler or not? But that is I think people would run themselves ragged and completely miss the point of Trump if they tried to engage with the things that he's saying as being literal.
Close. So Donald Trump doesn't speak literally. I say this a lot when people talk about like, people will say this. They'll say humans aren't always rational. And that's true. But people think that the opposite of rational is random. And that's not true. Irrationality can be highly predictable. So if somebody says people aren't always rational, that's true, but people are always predictable, assuming you have enough information. At least in the aggregate, people are always predictable, as long as they don't have psychosis or something, right? Just because somebody's not making a rational decision doesn't mean you can't understand the decision they're going to make, right? Do you want to save your child, or do you want to save 10 other kids? Fuck, I'm probably saving my kid. Maybe it's not rational, but like it's predictable. Obviously, a parent's got to save their child, right? For Donald Trump, when you might not have to take him literally, and you should take him seriously, but the things that he says matters. There's an underlying truth element to everything that he says. It's like a person that tells jokes. If I tell a joke, jokes are only funny because they're hinting at some underlying aspect that is true, right? Like if I tell a joke about like, coming home and I'm disappointed because my husband, has a job, so now I lost my dishwasher or something. Like it doesn't really make any sense. Like, well, I don't even know like what that joke means. But like those types of like jokes against like women or whatever might make more sense because like, like you might have a certain stereotype about a woman or blah, blah, blah. It's like, I get it. Huh? And then you either laugh or you don't laugh depending on your social disposition or whatever. But when you tell jokes, you're alluding to some underlying truth of the matter. I don't like it when people say, and they do this, and I think it's horrendously designed. People are like, it's just a joke. Nothing is just a joke. Things are funny for reasons. It's not random unless you're literally dealing with absurdist humor, which still has a reason for being funny. So yeah, I do agree that you don't take Trump literally, but when Trump is saying things like this, what Trump is saying and the underlying message of what he's saying is, I think he enunciates it pretty clearly in the ellipsis speech on January 6th, is that people are coming for your country. The whole system is rigged against you. Nobody can be trusted except for me. And everybody is going to rig, cheat, lie, steal, and destroy things unless you see me as your sole path through salvation. I was arguing with the big guy on this call with, I don't know if it's an Elon Musk AI or some guy that sounds like him or whatever, but at the end he brought in some dude to fucking argue with me. And I walked him through this thing because I truly believe this, that most conservatives would be fascists if you just didn't use the word, but you explained it in other terms. And I walked him through this thing where I was like, okay, I'm just curious, right? Let's say that the next election comes around and let's say that they don't win, but Donald Trump thinks it's rigged. Okay. Would you trust like judges that ruled on the case like last time? Would you trust them to make the right decision? It's like, well, no, I think that they're like very politically bought in and they're worried about like the country falling into chaos. Like, okay. Would you trust like Congress to make like a corrective measure or whatever? And he's like, well, no, I don't really trust the government. I don't think Congress would be able to do it. I wouldn't trust them. I was like, okay. Well, what about like the DOJ and the FBI and like their investigations, like with Barr and you know, and the FBI and Comey and everything? It's like, no, definitely don't trust them. It's like, okay. But you trust Donald Trump. That's an emperor. That's a king that you just anointed. You don't trust the judiciary. You don't trust the legislative. And you don't even really trust the executive branch. You only trust one man. That's it. And that's a problem. It's anti-American, and worse than anti-American, it's advocating for a style of governance that's never led to human flourishing or played out in a positive way in any part of society and any part of human history for an extended period of time.
It's interesting. So I have maybe a slightly different read on that. So the way I think it is really important to understand what Trump represents. So I largely don't think of Trump as an individual person. I think of every political leader that's very popular, especially in a populist moment, as the masses feel something that they don't know how to articulate. And the second somebody goes, I know exactly why you feel bad. It's this. And I have the exact solution. It's this. And I think the thing that everybody has to get very comfortable with, I talk about this to entrepreneurs a lot. The reason it feels like the world is stacked against you is because it actually is stacked against you. The reason it feels like the government does not have your best interests at heart is that just the dysfunction that comes with that large sort of amorphous thing with all these competing interests, it can't possibly, even if theoretically it wants good things for you, just operationally it's going to be next to impossible. So you get people, especially in a moment like now, for reasons that we talked about earlier, they feel disenfranchised, they feel unheard, they feel like someone is holding them down, they don't know what it is. And you get Trump, who comes in and adds words to it. He does it in this WWE style where he's bombastic, he's hanging on the top rope, and just like he gets you excited. And I will say, Destiny, that the most fun I've had watching your content was your 1v10, where you were just saying the most horrendous shit to people, but you were doing it so fast that it was impressive and hilarious. And yes, was some part of me feeling terrible that I found it so funny? Yes. But that there is, humans love that sort of entertainment value. So he does all of this. So I look at that and I go, oh, he is perfectly matching something that was already happening. Now, he in turn begins leading it and he amplifies it, to be sure. And P.S., I think a very similar thing is happening with Candace Owens. Candace, I would very much like to sit down with you, because these are people that represent something that is happening underneath the surface and that they're giving voice to. And so given that that is really what's going on, what we have to figure out is, if we're going to create a path forward, we have to understand that that's a real thing that's being felt. And now how do we get to a point where we can diffuse that by making them seen, feel, heard, and walk them out of this? So I don't think that Trump is creating that noise. I think he is the person that simply pulls the subconscious emotion into the conscious mind and thus speaks it as words.
Okay. I finally got a formal diagnosis for ADHD last year. I started Vyvanse for the first time in my life this year. I've been able to read like whole books and study in ways that I never have before, which has been phenomenal, a huge improvement in my life. One thing that I've always kind of wondered is have you ever heard of is it called like the great man theory or something?
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm always like, I think that, especially because I'm a hardcore hardline determinist in terms of like physics and everything.
You and me both.
Yeah. And it's not really logical. This doesn't logically follow. But I maybe from this kind of thought, I'm like, the world probably is as the world is, and it's probably like veering on a direction, and I don't know if any individual person like changes it too much. Maybe it doesn't apply universally across time and space, but I will say that for the first time in my life this year, I've super enjoyed reading about history. I used to hate history. You can find old clips who say, fuck history. Okay, I hate this. I'd rather do science, whatever, math, whatever other thing. I've super enjoyed reading history now. When I studied the history of Israel, I don't know what Israel looks like without like a Theodore Herzl, or I don't know what Israel looks like without a Ben Gurion, or without a Moshe Dayan, or without a Rabin, or without an Ehud Barak. I don't know what the Palestinians look like without an Arafat, with Abu Mazen now. I don't know if there are these singular people. I'm saying I don't know, but I'm really making a strong argument. Is I feel like there are moments in time where there's energy for a particular thing, and it would be wrong to view a person at the head of that as the cause for that energy. But man, the direction of that energy, I think that there are people that at moments of time are crucial. I don't know if we would have civil rights today, or if they'd be at the same level if MLK didn't exist as the person that he existed as. When I look at the energy and the fervor around Donald Trump, it's not bad that he's entertaining. Like you said, you were entertained watching me. I think I'm a pretty entertaining person. That's why I grew, I think, initially, because I'm entertaining. But I try to be entertaining with substance. Like, I'll be entertaining and I'll fight people and I'll scream at people. But like, if you want to talk about any particular things I'm screaming about or fighting about, or you come and watch my channel later, we'll dig very, very, very deeply into it, 100%. It's not just like words for word's sake. It's not entertain for entertainment's sake. I think that's an issue the left has had actually for a long time, that there was one guy, Jon Stewart, who tried to be funny and nobody else cared because they thought they were so correct about their opinions. They just didn't put any effort into it. And then you end up in this world where conservatives have honed their entertainment skills and they've honed their messaging so much. And you have all these hilarious talk radio guys, all these hilarious like news media dudes. Like, who is the Alex Jones of the left? Like, these people don't even exist, but the right has them in spades. And so I think that being entertaining is good. I don't disagree with that. I do think that the leaders at a particular moment in time are really important. Donald Trump has the ability to do amazing things with the energy that he's gathered, but instead he is a narcissistic demon that is bent on only furthering himself. And I think one of the things that I hate the most about my life now, especially when I look at my parents who are aging, my mom has Alzheimer's disease. My mom and dad were both 20 years in the Air Force. My mom is a Cuban immigrant, and Cubans fucking love the United States, okay? They were both military. They love the United States. I grew up hearing so many amazing, great things about my country. And as I grew up, especially in my early 20s, I started to become like pretty progressive. And I'd argue with them like, oh, you don't understand, Mom. Like, we're all fucking racist and blah, blah. My mom would be like, that's not true, honey. Like, they accepted, me, and we came here, and as long as you're willing to work, everybody, and we would fight that way. And something so horrible has happened that like we've done this to where now, as I'm reading full Supreme Court cases, as I'm reading Federalist Papers, as I'm reading these prior decisions and everything, I'm like, oh my God, like the way that the United States was built and the things that we've done and the things that we continue to do today are so uniquely awesome and American. Like, only in this country could like these things have happened. And as a united country, when America puts its mind to a thing, we can move, I don't even want to say move mountains. We can send people to the moon or Mars, right? We do more than move mountains. And Donald Trump just doesn't seem to want to do any of that. He wants to withdraw from the world. He wants us to be isolationist. What do you say? 10% tariff on everything. It doesn't seem like he's collecting the energy. Like, one thing that I say that's so tragic is because everything is so politicized, we can't even take credit for like the awesome fucking things that we do. To bring up an example from each side, regardless of how people at home feel about it, I guess, like I would argue that like the mRNA vaccines were a good example of public investment in terms of government research, globalization in terms of different companies working together, global academia, different researchers from all over the world, capitalism, because we had private investment going towards a good end, and multinational companies, because we're working with different companies, different countries. All of them came together to create something amazing and unique and awesome. And it was the culmination of a bunch of stuff that only could have been spearheaded by the United States. Or in the United States, like we're finally building rockets and sending people to the ISS on US-made rockets again. And we're like lead with electric vehicles, right? A lot of this is because of Elon Musk and his entrepreneur. Like that's a South African dude who He didn't go to Great Britain. He didn't go to France. He didn't go to Germany. He sure as fuck didn't go to Russia. He sure as fuck didn't go to China. He came to the United States to do this. And he did it here. And that's awesome. And now, if you're on the left, you have to hate everything Elon does. If you're on the right, you have to hate everything related to pharmaceuticals. My mom is, talking about how she'll never trust the mRNA vaccine and experimental technology. Meanwhile, she's in a drug trial for Alzheimer's disease. Conservatives will say things like, I don't trust the vaccines, they're experimental, but Joe Rogan said monoclonal antibodies, so we all want to go buy those for $3,000 a pop. And it's like, what's happening? Like, nobody can even take credit for there's not a good thing that the U.S. can do anymore that we can even take credit for. And then as an extension of that, now we can't move in any direction. In what is it in Matthew, where a house divided against itself cannot stand? We have no direction like externally anymore. The world looks at us and we're like a schizophrenic guy in the corner of the room screaming at himself, like hearing voices who has no idea what direction he wants to go. And that's tragic to me. I think that's very sad.
That is super tragic. What I heard in there is values becomes a big part of the issue. So hearing what your mom is talking about, what I find really interesting about America is that America used to have a sense of shared values that allowed us to have a shared narrative. Because we had a shared narrative based on shared values, we could point ourselves in a direction and be quite specific about that. I do, however, think that narrative was often a PR message, and behind the scenes, very different things were happening that are very distressing. And this is sort of built into my thing about why I have grown to distrust the quote unquote deep state, which I actually am beyond comfortable with using that phrase, because it does feel right to me in terms of you have some of it is just dysfunction. It's very hard to get a large group of people pointed in the same direction, but some of it is realizing, if I can get a smaller group within this that is effective, and we can then fight against different policies. So again, I haven't done the background research to know if the book that I'm reading is accurate, but it paints such an internally consistent logic that it really makes sense of things today. So the book I mentioned earlier, it's JFK and the Unspeakable, excuse me. And it talks about how Kennedy had this plan for peace, and he wanted to see peace with Cuba. He wanted to see peace in Vietnam. He wanted to see peace with Russia. Obviously, as a huge win in terms of backing down to escalating tensions in the Cuban Missile Crisis. That sort of triggers the people that wanted us. There were people in his government pushing him for a preemptive nuclear assault, which I don't think a lot of people are aware of. And he felt like he was living in sort of this divine moment where he knew that death was close for him, that he had to be willing to face that, and that he realized very quickly that while his government technically works for him, it's very easy for them to pull in opposite directions. And so even if the CIA wasn't involved in assassinating him, it's become very clear with historical perspective to see that there were people in his government that were very much working against him, that drew us deeper into Vietnam when he was trying to get us out, that were pushing him to do a preemptive nuclear attack when he was trying to de-escalate tensions, that he found ways to get back channel to the Russians so that he could directly de-escalate because he didn't trust people putting that message forward. Now, once I began to realize, oh my God, this isn't like, or maybe this is exactly like a business, where a business itself has this sort of deep state where people are working contrary to the CEO. And it really does start to make sense of a lot of things, that just humans have all these different desires. So when you don't have shared values and you don't have a shared narrative, now you're really in trouble. And because humans are looking for those shortcuts, social media gives them a gazillion shortcuts. And then you need a way to aggregate those shortcuts. This is like cable, right? They talk about things are bundled and then they're debundled. And social media first gave us this explosion. Everything was debundled. And so now there were just ideas, and you could listen to somebody like Alex Jones, or you could, I take all my advice from Martha Stewart, whatever. You could just take your ideas from wherever. And now what I see is happening is that we're rebundling on politics. And so now all these diverse thinkers become these team thinkers. And so it's like, I'm not pulling from 1,000 different influencers. I just go, I only listen to influencers on the left and they're all saying the same thing. Or I only listen to influencers on the right and they're all saying the same thing. But it is this really predictable human behavior patterns of tell me what to think.
Yeah, you've also had this issue. There's that in a way, there's like been this vertical and horizontal encroachment of politics in that. Do you know Sneeko?
Yes.
Do you know who Charlie is? Moist Critical.
I know Moist Critical from researching you.
Okay, he's like an internet like gamer kind of commentary YouTuber guy. Sneeko had said something interesting that I think is a huge insight into the minds of a lot of people that consume that type of content, and it had to do with Charlie was critiquing either I think it was Sneeko for something, I don't remember what, and Sneeko was like, "Look at you, like, do you think your fans want to be like you? Like, nobody wants to be like you. Nobody wants to grow up to like model their life after you." And his audience is seeing it like, yeah, that's right. And I'm looking at it, I'm thinking like, why the fuck would you watch Charlie to model your life off of Charlie? Like, wouldn't you just watch him for game stuff? But no, like every single thing that you watch, every single part of it has to be reinforcing like the same thing, and all of it becomes part of like this, like going to the gym is like right wing now. Why? What the fuck? How did that happen? Or like if you drive like a hybrid or like a Prius, you're like a left wing, like every single thing. If you work at a warehouse in like Arkansas, like you need to have an opinion on Leah Thomas. The political groups have grown to encompass the entire country, right? I think that to some extent we're tribal, and going back to what I said before, that's probably important. Probably some level of tribalism built in should be important. But I think tribalism works best the closest your tribe is to you, right? I would expect a person to be fiercely allegiant and always in the court of their family members. There's an old Arab saying, "Me against my brother and I against my cousin and I against the world," right? I would expect a family to be together. I'd expect neighborhoods to be together. And I would expect cities to be together roughly. And that's about as far as it would go. But now we've got like these whole political divides where a liberal, a left-leaning person in New York City is supposed to have the same opinions as a left-leaning person in Atlanta, Georgia. And then you run into these areas where, and thank God, the Justice Dems, especially AOC, have like matured and grown so much in terms of their political maneuvering. But you wound up in this world where people are shitting on John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock. They're attacking these left-leaning politicians in Georgia because they're not like progressive enough. And it's like, bro, why are you trying to get this guy in the most purple fucking district ever to act like a Democrat from like a plus 42 district in New York? It's not the same game. But because everybody's part of the same political group, now you have to have, like, everybody has to have the same opinions about like all these politicians because the groups have gotten so huge, and it's influencing every single area of your life. Like, oh, what do you like to watch? Whew, hold on. I got to think about who's in whatever I'm about to say, because I don't know I'm about to get canceled because this has like, Sam Hyde was in this YouTube video, or this was a documentary and they made the white people black or the black people white, or that, like, yeah. And it's very, very bad. It's not good. That politics is incorporating so much it's being incorporated to everything. One thing that I will say, and I guess it'll be a challenge or a thing for you to think about, or for other people to think about, or for me to think about, or you've got pushback. If things like a deep state concern you, then I think that the worry you should have is, I think you should ask, what are the motivating factors of the leader that I'm choosing, and what do I think he's going to do to make like the structure work for the country, to work for me. It would be a fact. We would do this fact if this was a debate, but like I would argue pretty inarguably, I would say, obviously I would say as I go to argue it, I would say that like Joe Biden, when you look at his history, his career, the legislation that he's championed and been a part of, and the way that he, moves in the world, the way that he has gotten bipartisan legislation passed, the way that he constantly says like, I'm a president for all of America, not just one party, that it's so funny that when that assassination attempt happened, for the first time in my life, conservatives were accusing Biden of having like fiery divisive, like fiery rhetoric or whatever. It's like, this is the most milquetoast dude ever. You're insane, If a deep state exists, and maybe we'll say that it does, right? I'm sure that it would exist I don't think that Biden would like that there's like some deep state trying to fuck over Americans. Now, we could argue that maybe he's too senile to combat it, or maybe because they work in similar ways that he does, that it benefits him, so he'd allow them to operate, right? These are all, if I'll say, maybe reasonable minds could disagree here, that there might be something that's like, okay, fine, sure, Stephen. Maybe Biden wouldn't be for a deep state that fucks us over, but maybe the deep state just serves his needs so much that he would allow them to exist and gain more power, right? You can make those arguments, sure. But then if I flip the switch and I go over and I look at Donald Trump, and you look at the way that Donald Trump has operated, well, okay, let's compare like the deep state tendencies. Joe Biden's son conservatives have long said that the Democrats weaponize like the FBI and the Justice Department, okay? Joe Biden's son has been convicted for crimes related to firearms that I don't know. I keep challenging people in my audience. Can you show me examples? I don't know if anybody's ever been convicted of these crimes as like primary offenses ever. That somebody sees a video of you doing a drug and you have a gun, so they nail you in lying on the 4473, which is a firearm form, an ATF form that you fill out every time you buy a gun. I don't think that's ever happened. Usually if you get caught on shit like that, it's because you get arrested doing something you shouldn't be, and then they find you with a gun and a drug, and then that might they might stack that charge on for something, right? Not only did Biden get investigated for it, Hunter Biden, by Joe Biden's FBI. He got convicted for it, and Joe Biden said he wouldn't pardon him. Do we really think that Donald Trump would do the same? Like, Donald Trump pardoned every single person that was part of his administration that got convicted of a federal crime, including people like Paul Manafort. For what reason, right? So, and then when you look at like the statements that these people make, right? Joe Biden is saying things like, I would never direct the DOJ to do anything. I don't give them direction. There's never been evidence ever that he's given them any direction for anything. If he had, why the fuck did Merrick Garland appoint a special counsel that ended up releasing a pretty damning report of Biden, the Her report that spoke to his senility and everything and him forgetting things or whatever? Would that have happened under Donald Trump? We don't have to guess. We can look what did happen under Donald Trump, right? If you read the Mueller report, which everybody hates, it's got a lot of good information in it. He wanted Jeff Sessions not to recuse himself. He wanted Jeff Sessions to kill that investigation. When Jeff Sessions recused himself from that investigation, Donald Trump lit him up on social media. And he said, this guy's a joke. This guy's horrible. And then he told Jeff Sessions, I think he told him to resign, and Jeff Sessions wouldn't, and it was just like a huge clusterfuck. He wanted Comey fired. Multiple people have said that he was on record saying, like, if this investigation happens, this is the end of my presidency. I'm completely fucked, he said. That's just like one of like 50 million examples, that all to say that if a deep state was something that we would be worried about, I don't think that Biden would be the person I'd be more worried about the deep state taking advantage of. I think it would be Donald Trump. Remember, of all the crimes and all the malfeasance and all the misdoings that Donald Trump has been accused of, Donald Trump's go-to defense for these was to go before the Supreme Court and say, I need to be immune from criminal prosecution. It wasn't, this is all bullshit, these are lies, I didn't make that phone call, I didn't make those fake electorate sites, I didn't tell Pence to flip the election, I didn't do any of that. It was, I was acting as president, I can do whatever the fuck I want. And the Supreme Court has now told me as much. I think that these are things to consider when we worry about a deep state, personally. But yeah.
It's interesting. I think the reason that the deep state matters is it is to the side of everything that you just said. So those are all perfectly valid points for somebody who's trying to think through whether I want Biden in the office or whether I want Trump in the office. But I think the deep state is going to be relatively agnostic to who is in power. What they are going to care about is whatever motivates them. So if you look back at JFK, you've got the military industrial complex that we were warned about. They're chomping at the bit. They've got a Cold War going that is extremely good for business. You've got what's about to pop off in Vietnam. That's extremely good for business. It's also an ideological battle, which I think people are not purely economic animals. And so I think people will do weird shit for ideology. And so you've got people that are like, much like the way they react to Trump, reaching out to North Korea, and they're saying that's just beyond the pale. You shouldn't speak to them in any way, shape, or form. Well, JFK, who certainly has a patina of having been somebody who was about moving us into a new era of peace, he was thwarted at every turn because he's trying to like, guys, we need to de-escalate. Nuclear weapons are evil. We need to step back from the brink. We have to understand that killing 30 million people, whether they're Russian or not, is grotesque, and we should avoid it at all costs. And so when he sees, whoa, like I have people in my own government that are pushing me to strike preemptively, that's crazy. And then he would see them undermine, hold communications that he would try to send, that they would misinterpret things, that they would, at one point with Castro, they authorized an assassination attempt on his life, which he found out about. And it was just like all this crazy stuff where he's like, you guys are undermining us at every turn. Same thing with trying to get out of Vietnam. He was trying to back us out of Vietnam. And some of this stuff's going to be contested. I will just say out loud, I understand where the points of contention are.
I was gonna say, I see the JFK stuff plays a lot, but I don't have any of the background.
Yeah. And look, there are moments of this stuff where, so again, this comes down to, in the thought experiment, if you have moments where people in the government are that are under the president's purview are ignoring what the president wants, now you've got a problem. So you can elect this leader. And this is exactly why I'm opposed to Biden, which is, I think, worth us colliding over if there is a collision. But so you've got somebody, to give you my base assumptions, who believes that there already is a deep state, as I define it, people working inside of the government that are like, the president will be here one day, gone the next. I have an agenda. I'm going to see this through. It may or may not align with the president. And then you elect somebody who does not have the cognitive wherewithal to be present. Like, even if you're going to say, no, when he's there and cognizant, he's fine and he's got great policies and all that. But you are saying we're trusting the government to the people that are running it when he's not cognizant. And I now have both a rational trigger and an emotional trigger going off. Like, just emotionally, that redlines me, that people would, they can see that he has cognitive decline. This is like, you'll say, no rational person will disagree with me about this. No rational person will disagree that he's got cognitive decline. And so I'm like, okay, so we all know that he will be worse in 4 years than he is today. I don't think anybody could plausibly deny that. And so I'm already terrified with where he's at in terms of his ability to do something like the Cuban Missile Crisis, where you have 7 minutes to make a decision. It could come after 10 p.m. or wherever he's declining. And so now he's going to have told his cabinet, or his cabinet will just have decided, in those moments, this is what we do. We wake him up, we present him with the answer. We have more or less trained him to say yes, or, whatever way we go. And that's how it's going to run. And so now I'm not even really electing the real people. So anyway, that's my bias. I can lay out what my beliefs and value systems are that lead me to that, but I am aware that there are underlying things that drive that. But because of that, to tie it all back together to why I brought this up in the first place and why I think it's somewhat tangential to the president, I think the thing that is really breaking down for us is, as a nation, we no longer have a shared narrative of what it means to be American. So even at the narrative level, we're now broken into teams. And because narratives ride on the back of values, we are also broken at the level of values. So we don't have anything that unites us in this shared way. And at a moment where we don't have a narrative that unites us, nor do we have values that unite us, and we're having to deal with unelected people doing, I'll even say they're all well-intentioned. They all believe they're doing the right thing. Even at that level of the thought experiment, it still strikes me as wildly problematic in terms of it will not lead us to anywhere positive.
Two quick things. One quick point and then one question. I agree with the first thing. I would even say it stronger. When people say people are not economic animals, people can be driven by lots of stuff that's not even remotely tethered to economics. I know for a fact that my parents, liberals made this mistake for a long time, thinking that people care about meat and potatoes issues. You can motivate voters a lot with certain issues. My parents would never, ever vote for a pro-choice candidate in the past, ever. They would never, it doesn't matter what economic issues on the table. If they're pro-choice, they're pro-baby murder, they would never vote for them. So people do care a lot about certain social issues. Those are very important to some people. This is just like a question. I have a rule that I never do this, but I don't think you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. So I usually don't like asking questions about it because people can say some wild shit. But I'm curious, in the book that you've read so far, how far into this book are you?
2/3.
Okay. I'm just curious. So if JFK felt like he was getting so much pushback, why didn't he ever fire any of these people or replace them with anybody else?
I don't know. So I can give you theory of mind. He did fire some people, but only the people where he had a direct, I told this person to do this and they fundamentally did something the exact opposite. But he has that famous quote where he said, I want to break the CIA up into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the wind. So some of it may have just been timing. Some of it is, I look at everything through the lens of an entrepreneur. Some of it is you'll create instability by just firing people randomly. And so there are times where Lisa, my business partner and wife, will have conversations where we will both agree that an employee is not meeting their obligations to the company. And I will say, I need you to give me some time because it will actually create more instability if I get rid of them, even though they're underperforming. And so that, again, this is theory of mind. I am purely guessing, but the level of complexity to this kind of thing, I think, is really, really extreme.
Okay. I would speak a bit when we talk about like, does Biden show cognitive decline? So this is an interesting question. When you look at Biden, you compare how he speaks between now and 4 years ago, there is obviously a noticeably decline. I know that he had a stutter growing up and that he spent a great deal of time overcoming that. But even irrespective of the stutter, it seems like his ability to speak on the fly or do debates or whatever, it seems as though it's gotten markedly worse. There are a couple things that I think are worth thinking about, though. The first thing is, when we compare Biden and his cognitive performance, we're comparing it with past Biden instead of with the person that he's running against. As tragic and sad and stupid as it is, we have two people that are in their fucking 80s that are running for president. I said this after watching the last debate. I think that the debate performance, I don't think that the biggest issue there was Biden's cognition. I think the biggest issue was he just had a really stupid debate strategy, which was to try to come in and autistically rattle off 15 different facts for every single point that he was bringing up, when Trump just has like basically slogans. And I don't know if I've ever, this sounds like an exaggeration or hyperbole. I always challenge conservatives in my audience, link me something if I'm wrong. I don't know if I've ever heard Donald Trump speak with what sounds like intelligence or insight into anything having to do with government in my entire life. Not a single time. I don't even know if he knows. I think he would name the three branches of government. I think so. But I don't know if he could tell me I don't think Donald Trump understands a lot about government and foreign affairs. So when Biden comes up and he gives a performance that shows a marked decline from where he was before, and I'm like, okay, wow, that's pretty scary. But nobody stops and thinks like, okay, well, has Donald Trump ever like rattled off like a series of numbers or shown like any kind of intricate understanding of the economy ever? No. And this kind of goes back to where the whole conversation started, where like, where's the bar? And it's like, if Donald Trump's cognitive abilities to be president, I feel, are like here, and Biden's like, we're here, and now they've markedly declined to here, he's still miles ahead of this guy. And the way that I would justify that is when you know anything about like medicine or medical trials or whatever?
Yeah.
When you do a medical trial, you do a bunch of research to see how a particular medication works. You've got the theory. The only thing that matters in the medical trial is the outcome. That's it. Medical trials are testing for side effects and for the alleviation of symptoms or the cure of like some disease. That's it. There was a huge, I don't know if I call it a scandal. There's a big deal that they had approved an Alzheimer's disease drug a couple years ago because it cleaned, I think, some of the amyloid plaques out of the brain, but they didn't actually have data that it improved Alzheimer's disease. They just had the data that it cleared some of those plaques. That was a really big deal. I think a couple people resigned over that because they were like, this isn't how we normally approve medicine. They just look at outcomes. If Biden is cognitively declined to a significant point, it leaves me at a loss for words to explain. People had this question of like, what happens when, the phone call happens at 4 a.m.? Like, who do you want answering the phone? And it's like, I understand we dive into so many like different factual realities that everything I'm going to say, people just disagree with me factually on. But I would say that like, I think that Biden handled the Ukraine-Russia situation, I think, with stellar leadership. I think he brought a lot of different people together. I think he set, in the beginning, understandable red lines. He was able to channel a lot of funding, do work in a collaborative effort to help Ukraine fight, but restrain them enough that we're hopefully not escalating World War III. Although now I think I might even disagree with the restraints. But I think that Biden navigated that incredibly complex situation where you've got a massive world power invading a European country for the first time in like 30 years. That's a really, really, really big deal. And Biden, I think, handled it. I think he did a stellar job. I also think Biden has done a really good job with Israel-Palestine, for as fucking difficult as that nightmare of a shit show is, and trying to show that we're a strong ally to Israel while also restricting their actions and saying like, you need to give the people in Rafah more time to flee. We're going to come out. We're going to build this humanitarian pier. I think that he's had like these two very challenging foreign policy environments. I think that the response in Yemen, I thought, was exemplary. You're going to bomb ships in the fucking, in the sea. Fuck no. We're going to come and we're going to obliterate your missile launchers. And we did it. I thought it was a really good decision. He pulled us out of the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen. I thought that these were all good decisions. When I look at the foreign policy conflict that the United States has right now, I see Ukraine, Russia, I see Israel, Palestine. I think that these are worthy causes and worthy areas to be involved in. When I look at the decisions that Donald Trump made, again, it dives into a lot of like factual analysis. For as much as people want to say like, oh, like these things wouldn't have happened under Donald Trump, all of the conditions were being created. So for instance, Donald Trump recognized the removal of the embassy to Jerusalem. He didn't solve or settle on anything. He didn't make any deals. He just recognized that movement. That was one of the major inciting, inspiring events for the 2018-2019 border riots in Gaza. People rioted over that. They're like, wait, what the fuck? We're getting left behind. Trump claims that they solved peace in the Middle East because of the Abraham Accords, because they brought some countries in with peace with Israel. These countries are already on the road to normalizing peace with Israel. They also excluded the Palestinians. This is all like fomenting this like fear. This is the reason why Palestinians have been violent. It's because they see themselves being abandoned by all of their Arab allies, and the Abraham Accords was another step in that direction, as was the moving of the embassy. Iran attacked Saudi Arabia for the first time ever. The United States had no response. The United States negotiated with the Taliban exclusively. We didn't include the Afghanistani government at all in that negotiation. And, under Biden, we leave. Donald Trump drew down our troops to historic low levels, and he'd set a timetable telling the Taliban we were going to be out by a certain date. And that the Afghanistan government wasn't even involved. There was land promised to the Taliban that the Afghanistan government didn't even know about. It was one of the reasons why the country fell so fast is when the Taliban started coming in, they didn't even have to fight for some areas. They were like, this is actually ours. And the government was like, fuck this is fucked. All this to say, and I understand we with anybody I could argue. Also, if you are hearing me, and if you're a conservative large figure and you want to argue over any of these things, I will gladly dive into any of these issues with extreme detail. I would love to. All of this to say that when people cite cognitive issues, I'm sympathetic towards it. But man, what is Donald Trump's cognition that I don't feel like he made almost any good foreign policy decisions? I don't think pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal was a good idea. I don't think giving Kim photo ops without getting any concessions was a good idea. Pretty sure Pence and Tillerson both cursed Trump for that, I think behind the scenes, because they were like, they're testing missiles again. We did nothing. There's just, man, if that's like a cognitive Trump, I don't know. Maybe I would prefer Trump with less cognition, so whoever's behind the scenes running things wouldn't make the same horrible decisions. But yeah, or maybe the argument against what I just said is that is that it's not Biden running it, then it's the deep state. So who knows what their whims are. The final thing that I'll say is you mentioned about the lack of shared narrative. I think that shared narrative, I think that part of what it came from was that we lived in the same material reality. So you have to confront facts at some point. Harkening back to the toaster fucking example, if you live in a shared reality, have you ever heard of the saying like racism doesn't survive first contact? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that like it's no surprise that liberals are less racist than conservatives because liberals grow up in more diverse cities. That's it. It's not because they're better people. It's just when you're around a certain type of people, you get better. You humanize them more. It's just a fact of life. When we're able to divorce our realities more and more and more and more, we're creating worlds that are irreconcilable because we don't even disagree on values that much. We just live in totally different fact-based worlds. The example I always give is I think that you have 99% alignment in Americans when it comes to the idea of a vaccine mandate. People think that they're debating the vaccine mandate, but they're not really. They're debating how dangerous COVID is and how dangerous the vaccine is. Because if I were to say, here's a 100% safe vaccine, and here's a disease that incubates for 2 weeks and then has a 50% fatality rate, I think conservatives would be practicing their Second Amendment right to make sure that their neighbors are getting vaccinated because they don't want to get infected and killed, right? And then on the flip side, if I say, like, do you think that we should mandate vaccines for the cold or else you lose your job? Even like 99% of progressives and liberals are like, no, probably not. That would be insane, right? So we think we have these huge value disagreements, but it's not ethical. It's not normative disagreements. It's actually epistemic disagreements, disguised, masquerading as normative disagreements. People will argue whether or not they're pro-choice or pro-life. Everybody's pro-choice and everybody's pro-life. What you're arguing about is whether you think a baby is a fetus, right? Where people argue against or for vaccine mandates or lockdowns, but value-wise, we all probably align pretty well. Nobody watched a zombie movie and thought, man, people should have been out like giving the zombies hugs. They probably like, oh, they should have been even more strict with their quarantine. We're just disagreeing factually on what's actually happening. And it's causing it to seem like we have these huge divergences in values. We just don't live in the same reality anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's something I call base assumptions. So you're building your belief on something. Base assumption on abortion. The second sperm and egg make contact and it's fertilized, that's a life. Mm-hmm. That base assumption then makes the rest of what they're saying make sense. All right, I want to ask, because on this idea of you seem very comfortable voting for Biden despite, thankfully, not spending time saying he's not in cognitive decline. And I'm not. We may have different views on what a president's role is. What should the president do? What's their purpose?
What should the president do? That's a really good It's a really good question. I feel like the president is the spiritual leader and head and representative and cheerleader of your country. The president of the United States is the one that other countries look to when they think of what America is right now. The president has the exclusive authority to negotiate treaties with other countries, right? And the article powers that are granted to the president, right? So the president is he's our representative and our cheerleader and our ambassador to the world. This is my president. He's the one who talks to your president. He's the one that goes to NATO. He's the one that, or goes to the UN assemblies and makes speeches. This is my president, right? So I think that's a job that he has internationally. And then I think a job that he has domestically or nationally is the president has to find a way to advocate and push for the things that he believes. He can do that judicially by making appointments or nominations, rather, to the Supreme Court that he feels are important. He does that legislatively by telling Congress what he will or won't veto, and then he encourages his party and he uses his bully pulpit and his ability to support people to push legislation. And he does it as part of the executive branch and how he decides he wants to execute the laws that Congress passes, right? So whether that looks like DACA from Obama or whether it looks like border enforcement from Trump, these are like the jobs of the president. He's our number one cheerleader, our number one ambassador. He's the uniter, but also the guy that pushes in the policy direction. And then he executes his roles and his function as the head of government. And I think these are all incredibly important jobs as president.
Agreed. Do you think if Biden was elected that he would survive another term?
In terms of like, will he die?
Yes.
I have no idea.
But
I don't know for either one. The thing is like,
does that factor into your decision? Then is maybe a better question. Do you care if he survives the full term?
No, it wouldn't even be no. If he were to die and Kamala were to take over, I would like I said, for me, I view Trump as like an existential threat, and that Donald Trump
to democracy or
yes,
to life.
To the existential to the existence of America as it is as a democratic republic. I think that Donald Trump represents there's a chance that when he's president, the United States is irreversibly changed and goes in a different direction that it can't come back from.
Didn't you say at the beginning, though, you didn't think that this would be our last election?
I think I was like agnostic on it. I don't know. I said it's possible that it's not. I can't get like. I said that the scary thing about Trump is there's a whole host of possibilities, and who the fuck knows? You can't like narrow it. It's very unpredictable. But I think it's easily within the realm of possibility that Donald Trump ends that somehow. But then I also said it's possible that he becomes president. He's just like a lame duck for 4 years because he's like, fuck you, I got mine. Get fucked. That's all I wanted to do. It's hard to say. I don't know. But also to that, you just spoke to the cognitive decline. I'm not trying to sound biased or anything, but the only reason why I say I'm not sure is because like it feels like I'm going totally on feels here. I don't know how many old people you've known, but I feel like with old people, there's this thing where they kind of like do like they like do this and they kind of like go down a little bit and they're like whatever. And then at some point, at some day, something happens. They either fall or they go to the hospital. Something happens like, I don't know if I've ever seen, I'm thinking of my grandma, I'm thinking of my grandpa, and I'm thinking of a couple aunts. I don't think I've seen anybody just like decline like this. Usually they just kind of like mosey along and then something happens and they're like something. It's like boom. But I don't know if maybe, yeah. I only said like that could happen to Biden. I could see it happening to Biden in a year. I could see it happening to Donald Trump in a year or two. Guy's pretty big. Guy, maybe he has like a heart attack or a stroke or something. Like I could see that happen. And I think any honest person, again, they're both over 80. I think that Trump's general health seems to be better than Biden's, I think. Although I'll say Trump made fun of Biden for falling off a bike, and Trump's way of making fun of him was to say he would never ride a bike. But yeah. That all is to say is that at that age, like anything could happen to where like, oh shit, fuck, one of them just like got sick and is dying. Yeah.
Okay. So there's two ways to go through any moment in life. You don't always have to be in one lane or the other, but to move towards or to move away from something. I get the feeling you are not moving towards Biden. Now, tell me if you are, but you're moving away from Trump, period.
Kind of. I would move away from Trump, period. But like I said, that Donald Trump's, I think, administration ended up being worse than any reasonable person could have predicted. I think Biden's administration ended up being way better than any reasonable person could have predicted. The amount of bipartisan legislation. Now, if you think legislation's bad or you don't like government, obviously you're going to disagree with me for all the reasons I think his administration was good. But I think Biden's done a really good job at least bringing lawmakers together in Congress to pass bipartisan legislation. He's done things that Trump said he would do that he couldn't, like the infrastructure bill. He's done things that Trump said he would do. Trump tried to bring back manufacturing with only tariffs. Tariffs kind of suck. Biden had the CHIPS Act passed. Like, I think that Biden has done a pretty good job, and it's another fucking president that where the liberal comes in and they have to pick up the pieces from the last administration. Obama came in after fucking 2007, and Biden has to come in after fucking COVID that Trump spent the first month denying even existed. So yeah, I think that Biden's administration has done a really good job, way better. Even like some progressives are like, oh, okay, sure, fine. Yeah, this guy's done more than I thought he would. So if he can continue on that trend without dying.
Do you think Biden can win at this point?
Man, I don't know. It's hard to say. The polls don't look too good, but there's been a weird divergence. It happened in the last midterms where even though Biden seems to poll very disfavorably, the down ballot elections are not impacted anywhere near as much as you would expect them to be. So I don't know if that means that the polling snapshots right now aren't accurately capturing Americans' feelings, or if people just really don't like Biden, but they'll vote down ballot for Democrat, so Trump is likely to win, or if voters will care more or get more mobilized around election time as the dates approach. I'm not sure. I don't know if the Democratic Party can afford to wait. I know there's been a lot of talks yesterday. I think AOC even went live on Instagram to talk about it, where the DNC, there's like a lot of whispering in the background about replacing him. This needs to stop, I think. The DNC needs to figure out, like, are we replacing him or are we not? If they're not, everybody has to get on board and message together. And if they are, then he needs to step down immediately, and they need to either do an open convention or have Kamala come forth and pick a vice president. Like, they have to figure it out and get on board with their messaging. But
what would your advice to them be?
I don't know, man. That's a really hard decision. The thing that I always say is I lean towards keeping Biden on the ticket just because it's more predictable. But if the polling slides enough and it's like unwinnable, then fuck it, you do your Hail Mary. If you want to swap him out for someone else, like if they did it, I'm not going to be mad if they do it. I'm going to be like, oh, that's such a horrible decision. But I do think that people discount how murky the waters are once you've replaced your candidate like that. Because people seem to be saying that, like, oh no, like we just swap in Newsom, or if, you know, Kamala comes in, or, you know, we bring in, Gretchen Whitmer, like it'll be great. Everybody, it's like, there's a world where that happens, where Newsom debates Trump and he just destroys him. And it's like, holy shit, the whole party's reinvigorated. This guy is like he's basically a child compared to these two. And it's like, oh, that's awesome. There's another world where he gets nominated and people forget that you had politicians that were like America's darlings, or at least the darlings of parties, that were like destroyed in like months. There were so many people, me included, by the way, that thought that DeSantis was going to upset Trump. That he'd come out. He had everything going for him. He was popular in the whole party. He had a good record of governance. Florida was seen by all Republicans as like the stalwart against the COVID lockdowns and everything. It's like, this guy had everything going for him. And then the very first time I saw him talk to a voter, I was like, oh shit, this guy does not have it. Same thing with Chris. It was Chris Cuomo, right? Was the former governor? Yeah. That guy, everybody loved him. People were talking about, 2 scandals.
Actually,
gone.
Andrew Cuomo was the governor, I think.
Was it Andrew? Wait, which was one that had the sexual scandals?
Chris is the one, I think, that's the pundit, and then his brother. I think it's Andrew. Anyway, one of the Cuomos.
Yeah, I think, yeah. And then the 2 scandals came out and he was gone immediately. He like disappeared entirely. It's not as applicable, but for people that are at least my age, people that are at least my age, Giuliani was the most loved he was America's mayor after 9/11. Like, I can't, like, maybe some people in New York might have had mixed feelings with some parts, but for the most part, Giuliani had an overwhelmingly positive opinion. He destroyed his reputation under Trump. All this to say that if you want to swap somebody out, I'm not going to sit here and scream against it. I'll unite behind basically anybody that the Democratic Party nominates, but don't pretend that just because you swapped it into a person, it's going to be an easy road. Like, so much could happen after that point.
Fair. I don't think it is super fruitful when people are like, do you want to say sorry? Do you take this back, that, the other? But I do want to ask, I have said many times that I would take a bullet for my wife, and love or hate somebody's politics. I was moved very deeply by the fact that Corey literally shielded his family with his body and took a bullet. Does that willingness to do that, I assume you would do that for your own son, does that land for you? Is that
I mean, I can have sympathy for him as a father, but not as an American.
That's very clear. Destiny, thank you for taking that. Steven, I can't believe it. I see you as Destiny so many times socially.
One more question.
Of course.
Your biggest holdout for Biden is the senility. I'm saying that as a statement, that is true, right? That's like one of your biggest holdouts for him?
That is my biggest holdout by far.
If today it's announced that Biden is swapped with Kamala, do you reconsider immediately, or are you still probably riding with RFK?
I would reconsider in the truest sense of the word that I would go consider her.
Yeah. Or I'm sorry, that's what I mean. I don't
She
mean like
feels completely invisible to me. I have no idea what her policies are, stances are. I just see memes about her. So I know as of right now, I don't have an original thought on her. So I would have to look for sure.
Okay. And then if you share it, I don't know how political you get. Why do you like RFK? What are the things that drives you, Tom?
He gives me a concrete vision of what the future could be. He makes me very excited about the positive direction that he would take things in terms of health, in terms of transparency in the government, in terms of what he would do with the budget. I wish more people had watched the debate that he did with, so you had Biden and Trump doing their thing on CNN, and then he actually did a live thing with, I think it was John Stossel moderating. And so they would basically press pause on the live stream of the Biden-Trump thing and say, okay, now RFK, you have a couple minutes to answer. And those two, it was just at times boring, at times depressing, but they were never talking about substantive issues. And RFK just kept bringing it back to, we really have to focus on the budget. And I come very close to being a single issue voter on the budget. I think that we are going to drive off a cliff. And I think that while you were very accurate earlier when you said we can have a civil war without economic hardship, when you have economic hardship, every problem is magnified 100-fold. And the economy is actually the thing I focus on a lot. That was sort of how I started getting into the cultural side of things. And then that sort of like pulls you in a little bit to the political side. He's the only one talking about it. I think it's absolutely critical that people understand what's going on, that both Trump and Biden printed an obscene amount of money. And if you think of that as a way to steal money from the people, which I think it is, and then it goes back to the rich. So this is where I start getting beyond animated, and I'm one of the rich, that it helps. And if I'm telling you this is dumb, this is terrible, you should be running in the opposite direction. Hopefully people take that seriously. He is focused on physical health. He talks about those things. I did about 12 hours of research. So you can think that's a lot or the world's tiniest drop in a bucket. But I did about 12 hours of research on him for an interview that I did with him. I did not see any signs of crazy. I'm not doubting that they're out there, and I'm sure people could show me stuff that I would just be mortified by. But in real time, I was very impressed, certainly of the three options that I have.
Okay. Can I ask one more quick question? Or
Yes.
do we need to go right now?
Let's do it. There are no stormtroopers at the door.
No, sure. Okay, one more quick question. I'm sorry, because you brought it up.
4 minutes before they come kicking us out.
4 minutes. Okay, super quick meme question. Okay, because you brought up deep state and counterculture, and this is a thing that I saw happen when I was a supervisor in a restaurant, and this happened to my fucking Eve Corporation. Okay, when I played in Eve, and I'm curious what happens in big businesses. I call this second meeting. Okay, second meeting is where the first meeting is where the execs, the bosses, the managers, or whatever come out and they talk to their employees. Hey guys, we're having these issues. This is what we need to do. Do you need any help from me? Whatever. You have your meeting, and then you have something that I call second meeting, which is where these fuckers that never bring up their concerns in the main meeting all fucking meet in the corner, and they're always like one or two leaders, and they're always like bitching about management, but they never actually fucking bring it to. Did this happen in big businesses too, or is this just in small?
Of course.
Okay.
And so we have built a culture into our company where that's anathema. And even there, it's going to happen a little bit.
Yeah.
But as long as you have enough people that see the positive outcome of having a culture, we call it a whisper culture.
Sure.
So there's no whispers. If you're going to say something, say it out loud. When you have people that see the benefits of that there's no backstabbing, bitching, gossiping, all of that stuff is just absolutely off the table, they'll speak up pretty fast and be like, don't do that, because they know where it goes. But yes, even a company that, a gigantic company down to a medium-sized company, all this stuff exists, and you have to work very hard to avoid it.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Stephen, thank you for coming on, man. I, again, think that you're a very important part of the sense-making apparatus. I hope you don't go on a full Bloodsport arc. I hope you stay in the, I'm going to meet people and just walk them through the logic. By all means, destroy them with facts and logic. I'm here for that. But yeah, I hope that we continue to be able to learn from you. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
For sure. Everybody, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Peace. The following is a previous video that expands on this topic and brings you new ideas. I hope you guys enjoy it. It's amazing.
What's interesting that has happened in the last, say, 10 days post-debate is that the machine, the system, the matrix, whatever you want to call it, it can no longer control the narrative.